right, are we good?
Yep.
Sir. All right, I'll bring this meeting to order. Welcome everybody to the Tuesday, February 13th, 2024 Lawrence City Commission meeting. And now we'll have Sherry go ahead and give us the rundown to start us off.
Good evening, everyone. To minimize distractions during the meeting, please silence your cell phone. For those attending virtually, please ensure you are muted and your video is off when you are not actively participating in the meeting. The city reserves the right to turn videos off or mute virtual participants. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. When the mayor calls for public comment, please approach the podium to indicate you wish to speak. Those participating virtually should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat, and all chats go directly to the meeting host. Please state your name before speaking, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Sherry. All right, start us off with agenda item A. Approve the agenda. City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting. Any
Move to approve the agenda?
second out there?
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Passes 5-0. All right. Item B, recognition, proclamation, and presentation. The recognition of Truman Waugh. There's someone here to speak to that?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jillian Brodrig. I'm honored to be here as the representative for Douglas County Emergency Management, and I'm joined by our local Emergency Planning Committee Chair, Tony Foster, as we celebrate Truman Waugh for his 40-plus years of service to our community. Bud has dedicated himself to serving others, particularly those that have been impacted by disasters. Leveraging his extensive expertise, he's made a positive impact on both our community resilience as well as our operational effectiveness. From community training to emergency operations, Bud shares not only his technical expertise, but has mentored volunteers and is quick to share a kind word, a smile, and a joke just at the right time when you need it. We are grateful that this distinguished public servant continues to volunteer with emergency management as an instructor for our community emergency response team training, as well as a member of our auxiliary communications team. Thank you, Commissioners, for this opportunity to celebrate the 40-plus years of community service that Bud Waugh has given to the Douglas County and the City of Lawrence communities.
Thank you. All right. Bud, did you want to say anything?
They're going to read the proclamation and you get a copy.
All right. Nope. All right. Whereas Truman Waugh has resided in Lawrence for the past 68 years and has devoted his life to public service, and whereas Bud has represented the City of Lawrence Commission on the Douglas County Emergency Management Advisory Board and Local Emergency Planning Committee for the past 44 years, and whereas Bud is a United States Army veteran who then as a civilian served another 30 years as an operator with the Army Military Amateur Radio System, and whereas Bud earned a prestigious United States President's Call to Service Award by serving over 4,000 volunteer hours of service in a lifetime to his country and community, and whereas Bud was honored with the 2005 Wallace Galuzzi Outstanding Volunteer Award for service with the Federal Emergency Management Agency by traveling to 6 hurricane disaster sites, serving over 2,000 volunteer hours, and whereas Bud is a retired analyst, having served 35 years with the Kansas Geological Survey and continues to serve as a volunteer for the Douglas County Emergency Management as a member of the Auxiliary Communication Team and the Community Emergency Response Team. Now, therefore, I, Bart Littlejohn, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, along with my fellow commissioners, do hereby recognize Truman Waugh for his steadfast commitment representing the Lawrence City Commission on the Douglas County Emergency Management Advisory Board and the Local Emergency Management Planning Committee. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to thank every
Oh,
person.
excuse me, Mr. Waugh, can you go ahead and move to the mic?
Just next.
Just so everybody can go ahead and hear you.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'd like to thank every boss that I have ever had. I can't remember any of them that have actually did their job as being boss, but they're all great people. And they helped me in the way they did their work because it gave me a practical lesson on how to work with people. And it's even in, like Skywarn used to be, because I'm not in Skywarn right now. I've had people treat me like one of the family. You go out and park in their driveway and watch the clouds and radio back to the headquarters. I've had them come out down this long path from the house with a tray of lettuce and all kinds of stuff that covered up a real dinner. and I kind of hate to be in a position to dislike people like that. They're very fine people there, very fine people at the public, and I just can't thank them enough for what they gave me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. I will move us on to item number C, public comment. The public is not allowed to speak on items or agendas or issues or items that are not scheduled for discussion on the agenda. Comments should be limited to issues and items germane to the business of the governing body. The commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we hold off for a second to let everybody go ahead and exit? Thank you. Any public comment at this time?
I thought surely there'd be somebody who has public comment. I wasn't prepared to come up so quick. I thought surely there would be some other public comment. I got an interesting view of things today. An interesting view of the confusion between you guys up there. And we're going to need you guys to get on the same page. So whether that means you guys need to have some private special meetings or what needs to happen, but you guys all need to come to some kind of consensus understanding of what your job is and what your authority is and what your directives are. Because I know at least one former and one current have some differences about how things should be done. Hopefully, we're starting to find out that Bert Nash isn't really all that much of what we thought it was doing for our money. And unfortunately, it's been misunderstood that I'm blaming all the ground people on the bottom rung. This isn't a bottom rung issue with Bert Nash. It's a top rung issue. And unfortunately, the bottom rung gets to play out their role in the street, or they get frustrated and choose not to do that role anymore. But the reality is that the top rung is expecting the bottom rung to do things that the bottom rung knows it's not supposed to be doing, and they're being put in the untenable position of either going along to get along or moving on. Those are their choices. And that's unfair to them, and it's unfair to the public they're supposed to be serving. That's about 50% of your homeless problem here in town right now. is that your overarching plan included a lot of Burton Ash goals and ideals that didn't ever come to fruition. While I respect the fact that there was a plan, Commissioner Finkeldye, when we brought up the emergency issues and asked that you guys open up the community shelter, and a lot of people came here to ask that, you made the comments that there was a plan, and indeed there is a plan. But that plan is a very high-level, grandiose up-here plan with no real implementation down in the middle rungs, and that's what you saw during that winter emergency, was that there wasn't much implementation happening of that grand plan that we had. I don't know where the dysfunction is, but whatever's happening in the high-level offices is not getting down to the low-level offices. You may actually have the right person to solve that. I have my differences with a lot of stuff that's happened, but Misty might actually be the right person to solve it if you keep them out of her hair and keep them out of her way and keep them from making bad decisions for her.
Okay. Not seeing any other public comment here. Jerry, online?
Stephen Watts.
Hi. Wow. What he just said, that isn't what I came here to talk about tonight, but, you know, what is the job of the commissioners? We have prior commissioners who believe they represent the public, or they don't represent the public, but rather as function as go-betweens to the town executive team, instead of having, let's use the military model because that's the one that's in play these days, much to my dismay and disdain, that there are no boots on the ground going out and finding out what is actually going on in the belly of the beast of our town government. And that is sort of what Mr. Arabi was just referring to. But what I'm here tonight is to talk about the provision of government service in our town. We must seek and expand expansion. We got to seek and expand expansion of service. We have to increase it, not reduce it. Let's use it as an example. The town commitment to, quote, sustainability, unquote. There hasn't been electronic recycling for over a year in our town now. Also, there hasn't been an expansion or a realization that shredding events should be run in tandem with the electronic recycling. Shredding events go on across the country. In fact, our town staff have now negated the prior 2 years that our town experienced for shredding events in conjunction with electronic recycling, stating that they can't get staff to go work that. I assert that the Fair Labor Standard Act can bring into play the ability of these well-paid executives to come and meet the public and hang out at these recycling events and do what they're going to do. I mean, you know, man the ramparts, so to speak. Instead of making $30,000 a year employees work on the weekend, these $200,000 a year folks, I don't know, we want to expand services. Where is the electronic recycling? Do we not care about that anymore? Was it just something for cannon fodder? And the excuse of, well, the county might do this and the county might do that. Haven't we learned that the relationships that have been established over the last 60 years between the city of Lawrence and the county of Douglas County have not been particularly helpful to the town of Lawrence? Yes, our town moves and progresses and grows. It's a good thing. However, let's look for expansion of services by our town government versus turning it over to not-for-profits. Thank you.
That's all the comments, Mayor.
Okay. All right, I'll move us on to agenda item D, consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and approved by one motion. Members of the governing body may remove items for separate discussion if desired. Members of the public may remove items identified as quasi-judicial for separate discussion. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes per comments. Any of the commission, would you like to pull any items on the consent agenda?
None for me, sir.
Okay, not seeing any. And we have one item on the quasi-judicial. Would members of the public like to pull that? Not seeing any here. Sherry, can you check on Zoom?
There's no comments on that item there.
Okay, I'll go ahead and bring it back.
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's 5 passed, 0 opposed. All right, and let's go down. All right, item F, work session. The work session provides an opportunity for the City Commission to discuss items in greater detail. The Commission will take up no binding action on these items presented during this time. Work session topics are eligible for public comment. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. All right, you guys are up. Sorry, oops. Was it you, Chief? Yes. All right.
We try to find an average with the desk height there for all of us. Do you want to get the...
I think you'll just do escape when you're sharing that other.
Okay.
I don't know. Share screen.
All right, good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Rich Llewellyn. I'm the Fire Chief for Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. I have with me Mackenzie Azell, who's our Accreditation Manager, and Kevin Joels, who's our Division Chief of Emergency Medical Services. We're here tonight to give you an update from the Safe and Secure Outcomes area, and really want to focus on talking about cardiac arrest and launch our PulsePoint app, what I would call a hard launch. It's been here for a while. It's been here since I got here. We've been trying to add some features in the background. Now we want to do a hard launch and roll it out. And I hope at the end of this presentation you'll see why. And I hope to answer all your questions or generate some questions and discussion and that we can talk about the app. So we'll go ahead and move into the presentation. There we go. All right, just want to talk about PulsePoint itself. It's an app that you have on your phone. It's platform agnostic, so it can be on your iPhone, it can be on your Android. The background and where this came from, a fire chief in San Ramon Valley named Richard Price was having lunch, heard a fire engine pull up. He was having lunch in his own district. Fire engine and ambulance pulled up. He went outside as most fire chiefs would do to see what was going on, asked what was up, and found out there was a cardiac arrest in a neighboring business. That prompted him to think, had he known that there was a cardiac arrest there, he could have gone there, started CPR, got a public access defibrillator, delivered a defibrillation shock, made a difference, but he had no idea what was going on. And just imagine a building this size, there could be a cardiac arrest on the second floor in a closed office. We wouldn't know until the fire department pulled up, and we might see some folks in blue walking behind us with their equipment. And at that point, again, we'd be wondering what was going on. San Ramon Valley is a very tech-focused fire department. Their website address is firedepartment.org. So they were on board early in this internet fad and adopted it early. He started talking to developers, created an app that essentially crowdsourced the notification to the public of cardiac arrest events in a public space. So if there's a cardiac arrest event that happens here as a public building, folks would know. If there's one that happened in a house, the public doesn't know, and that's where the original focus of this app was. It's evolved over time. We'll talk about some of the evolution. as he puts it, when he first phrased what his idea was, we're going to dispatch the public to cardiac arrest events, there was some consternation amongst the dispatch center. There was some consternation amongst his governing board, other firefighters. Say, we don't want a crowd there. We don't want to violate people's privacy. If a cardiac arrest event happens in a public place, there's already the potential for a crowd to be there. Hopefully we want someone there who would know CPR and could start CPR. I've done CPR a lot in my career, and it's never pretty, but the people we've saved, I don't think had too many complaints about the fact that they were subject to medical procedures in public. I've had some good outcomes where folks thanked me. I've never been approached to say, I wish you would have left me alone in that public place, because I'm embarrassed. So that was his brainchild. Launched it, created a nonprofit foundation that is now his job. He retired from the fire service and now runs the Pulse Point Foundation, and started getting it out into communities across the U.S. We're going to see some communities where folks are at that follow us, and we'll have some discussion about some of the other aspects of the program. Why is this important? It's important because 1,000 people every day in the U.S. experience sudden cardiac arrest. Here in Douglas County, you can see the numbers are about 10 a month experience cardiac arrest. We can't put a firefighter on every corner, but we can probably have a cell phone near every corner. And if that person who has that cell phone knows CPR and is willing to perform CPR, that expands our reach. You can see the graphic on the right side of the screen talks about the occurrence of brain damage. The likelihood of somebody being resuscitated with no damage decreases by about 7 to 10% per minute. So by the time you hit 10 minutes, the likelihood is pretty low that somebody's going to have or going to be able to be resuscitated without any kind of damage. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I've seen some really weird stuff and weird in good ways happen over the course of my career, to where people who had been down for a long time came back without brain damage. But the earlier we can get people CPR, the earlier we can get them defibrillation, the better their outcome is, or the more likely their outcome is. A question was raised last week about the economic impact of cardiac arrest. I have seen some studies that look at the impact of saving people, the reduction in economic loss because somebody didn't die, and it's significant. One I was looking for, a data point I couldn't find, is what's the economic loss by time CPR was first applied. I'd be interested to see that, to see what the difference is. I would propose there probably is a difference, but that's a study for another day. I'm going to hand this over to Kevin Joles.
So one of the safe and secure outcomes that we're looking at is the instance in which we deliver the patient to the hospital with a pulse, or we call that return of spontaneous circulation, or ROSC. Over the 4-year span here, because their CARES data has not been released yet, it usually comes in April the following year, we've been on about an average of 20.3, which is roughly about the national average for high-performing CPR communities. We do have the opportunity and we put a pretty high target at 60%. I think it's achievable, but it takes a lot of work in order to get there, which one of those ways is by using the PulsePoint app, having it be something known in our community, teaching CPR at a better rate than what we're doing now, and having people aware of what's going on around them so that they are not hesitant to act when the time comes. So you'll see quite a discrepancy between where we are and where we want to be. However, this is an opportunity to be able to educate the public in a grand way. And on the slide prior, I think Chief may, and I hate to point it out, but we're about 20 cardiac arrests a month now, and that's grown steadily over the years. As you know, our calls have increased over the years quite significantly. So we're about 20 every single month. So I spoke of the CARES registry, which is the cardiac arrest registry to enhance survival. In this nation, the United States, we have the CARES registry. There's other registries across the world that measure cardiac arrest data. Now, only probably 30% of the nation's EMS and first responding agencies devote their not only their money, but their time in entering this data. So this data mostly comes from high performers. Now, there are high performers that don't put anything into CARES registry, but how it works is we have an individual within our organization that submits this data monthly, and then it goes to the hospital, whatever hospital that we transport to. A majority of our cardiac arrests, 95% of them, go to LMH. The rest of them might go to Johnson County or a Topeka hospital, but they'll report as well. And so how we get our number is when the hospital reports as well. So like I said, the safe and secure outcome is the return to spontaneous circulation when we deliver to the hospital, and then the CARES registry is what happens once they've been released, if they do eventually are released from the hospital. This also costs us money. However, the current Johnson County medical director for the EMS system was able to work a deal with the KDHE and the CARES registry. So the money that we spent this last year and the money that we'll spend for 2024, which is about $1,500, will go towards the CARES registry, but this will be the last time, hopefully for a while, with a grant that we won't have to pay $1,500. It'll essentially be free for the state of Kansas for anybody to use it, which will hopefully drive the data up throughout the state, and some non-users will become users.
So let's talk about how PulsePoint works. Somebody calls 911, says there's somebody here who's in cardiac arrest. They're not moving, they're not breathing. I've listened to a lot of these calls, and the dispatchers typically do a pretty good job of parsing out if somebody has fainted versus somebody's in cardiac arrest. There's some really key questions that are asked early in the phone call that target this. We identify, once the dispatchers identify it is a cardiac arrest, they push the buttons on their console, and it's siphoned off to the PulsePoint data server. That server identifies the geolocation of where that cardiac arrest event is, pings everybody within a quarter mile, or it pings all the PulsePoint nation, if you will, identifies those users within a quarter mile, and then gives them a notification that there's a cardiac arrest in a public event, as long as it's in a public space. The nearby users will get that notification, and it's a really distinctive sound on your phone. I know, my phone makes a lot of beeps over the course of the day, and I'm used to a lot of them, but when PulsePoint sounds off on my phone, I look at it because it's something different, it's something unusual. I have had it happen recently as December. And so it does happen, occasionally, and I'll get into why I've had it happen a couple times. And then ideally, on the far right, users will head over to where the cardiac arrest event is, and you see that individual has an AED in their hands. Hopefully they can get access to an AED as well. So let's talk just a second. Let's switch to the video, and we're going to watch a video from the PulsePoint Foundation.
This is Joel. He just suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. He isn't the only one. Today, 1,000 people in the United States will have the same experience. Time is now critical. As a call is placed to emergency dispatch, the clock continues to tick. Emergency responders are several minutes away. Unfortunately, several minutes can be too long. For every minute Joel goes unaided, his chance of survival decreases by 10%. Fortunately, Joel lives in a PulsePoint connected community. PulsePoint is integrated with his community's emergency dispatch. The moment Joel's emergency call came in, a PulsePoint alert went out, connecting nearby CPR-trained volunteers and AEDs to his location. Meet Scott, an off-duty firefighter out running errands, and Donna, a financial planner working next door. Because they were nearby and quickly alerted, they're now able to provide life-saving care until emergency responders arrive. That initial care made all the difference. This is Joel. He's a sudden cardiac arrest survivor. Armed with Pulse Point, any volunteer can help save a life. Become a life-saving volunteer and download Pulse Point today.
Hello. We use CPR when someone has collapsed and is not breathing because it can keep people alive until emergency.
Oops.
Is that the right spot? It is, yeah. Can we go up one? I think. Let's go back one, please. Yeah, right there. All right, so this is what your phone screen is going to look like when you get a CPR call. You're going to hear that unusual sound. You're going to see a CPR needed, and you can click I'm responding and guide me, and you'll get a step-by-step map to wherever the CPR is occurring. That's what it looks like on the left when you first get it. When you hit I'm responding, you see what the center looks like. You can see that there is a cardiac arrest on a golf course. Looks like the exact location is in the rough, and a hilly golf course. So I can see some problems there. The blue dot is the person whose phone has been alerted. They know where to go. You can see that there's an AED nearby. That's the yellow triangle or rectangle. And so they can access that AED and then take it with them. Once they get to the patient, if they need a quick refresher on how to perform CPR, they can go to the next screen and say, I'm at the patient. You can see that this is also language agnostic, so you can download the app in your preferred language. I'm not sure all the ones they have, but they do have Spanish as well as English. Next, I want to talk about Verified Responder Pro. I mentioned that Rich Price and the Pulse Point Foundation had started to evolve the app after they got it up and running with the first crowdsourced CPR aspect. One of the next things they worked on is called the Verified Responder Program. When I was working at another entity, I was fortunate enough to be in charge of a regional pilot project that piloted the Verified Responder Access. This program allows us as an agency to identify folks and verify that they are responders, and they end up getting access to the private CPR events. So if it occurs in someone's home, our folks who are our responders are going to get notification that CPR is needed nearby. I responded to a call in December that was in my neighborhood. I wasn't the first one there because it was far enough away that the crews that were on duty got there first, but I did go over and do what I could to assist and talk to the patient's family and help out with the call. So I got that notification. It happened not while I was at Spokane, but right after I left Spokane. There was a Spokane Fire Department lieutenant who was off duty, got notification that his neighbor was having a cardiac arrest. He had a grant-funded AED that was his own personal AED, took it over there, delivered a shock before the fire department arrived, and the patient had a return of circulation before the responders got there. So good outcome. That's what we want to do. Most cardiac arrests occur in the home, and so we need to be able to spread our reach. We do have a responder who's responded a couple times last year to an arrest or a notification in his neighborhood, and we've recognized him for that. And it is, you're helping your neighbors, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about the Verified Responder Pro program. The app has an ID that you can show. So, hey, I'm a verified responder. I'm here. It's not just somebody showing up at the door. And in my case, I had dog pajamas on, so I changed out of those because I didn't want to show up and scare whoever was there. But the Spokane case study I was talking about, he showed up with a white T-shirt. He just lounged around his house, but he had his app that said, "Hey, I'm a verified responder." So he was able to get in and help out. And you could hear the phone call. The wife of the patient talking to 911 said, "A firefighter's here." So he was there and identified himself. Kinsey?
Hello. So this is the community view. Chief just talked to us about the First Responder Pro. The other side of that is community. And so this has been, he'd mentioned that we rolled this out 2 years ago, and it was a soft, low-key rollout, and that we've made improvements since we first made that public. And so one of the improvements is, this is LDCFM's, a little screenshot from the other day. This is our feed. And so the feed will show you, I think it's up to like 100 incidents or the last 24 hours. And so you'll see as calls come through, there's a medical emergency at the very top. It does not give the exact location on the community view. When you click that incident, typically it takes you to a map and it'll show you exactly where that is. On the community view, that map is not available. And so we have a medical emergency. We can see that Medic 2 and Quint 2 are responding on that. And so if you are outside and you're in this area and you see Medic 2 go by, you kind of connect the dots to what LDCFM is doing. You can also see the time that's there. And as you scroll down, you can see our fire alarms are different than the medicals. So any fire call is going to give you an exact address. So any call that does not have a patient will show you the exact address on the list, but then also if you click on it, it will open up that map template. So users in the community view can subscribe for free to a lot of different departments, really any agency that has it. Me personally, when I travel, I like to keep it open to see what agencies, as I'm traveling around, have PulsePoint, and to see what those departments are doing. So community members can also do that. PulsePoint is a Douglas County app. So Douglas County has, when they rolled this out, it was a county-wide application. And so most of our first responding agencies in Douglas County have this app. So LDCFM is not the only one, if you live in Douglas County, that you can follow. And then we'll go to the next one, please. So this is a quick screenshot that PulsePoint is able to provide us as verified responder users, an admin user specifically. And so this gives us this quick snapshot of how many people, well, where people are that follow LDCFM when this was taken. And so right now we have a little less than 2,000 subscribers to LDCFM. And so if someone lives here and another family member lives maybe in Florida, they can still keep an eye on what LDCFM is doing by subscribing to that app. So you can either see a department's activity, whether you're in that location within their jurisdiction, or if you subscribe to them and you're not in that jurisdiction. So this is kind of cool. You see two different colors. We have yellow and we have red. Red is the verified first responders. So those are LDCFM people. We can see that we have some people traveling right now, or when this was taken. And then everybody else is just the community. And so for LDCFM administration, we can see, the only information that we can see on these users is that it's a community user for yellow, and that's it. And then for red, we can see who that verified responder, the ID of that phone that PulsePoint has given them. So there's a lot of very private information that never even makes it onto the server, but it gives us just enough to have these conversations to say, this is how the app works, and this is our reach right now. And then we have the next slide has kind of a zoomed in picture to the city of Lawrence. And so this was February 5th that we did a screenshot. So this is pretty impressive, especially for a soft rollout. We have quite a few people in the city that do subscribe to LDCFM. Obviously, the reason that we're here today is to increase the subscribers and just the interaction with LDCFM. And one way is through social media, another way is through PulsePoint to see our actual activities. And then have things that shouldn't be shown or that are private be private, but anything that we're able to show, to have that out there and be transparent. I think we're ready for the next slide.
So another enhancement that the PulsePoint Foundation added in was an AED registry. So we want to get people CPR, we want to get people early access to AEDs. If you don't know where the AEDs are, it can be difficult. So again, they turned a crowdsourcing approach to identifying AEDs, capturing that information, and getting it into the system. So the map on the left shows AEDs, and they're a little bit clustered because of how the GEO program works, or the GIS program works. So you can see right around here, there's 3 AEDs. There are 3 locations that have AEDs. And this building is one of them. I know because I've entered some of them that are in this building. KU's been very good about entering AEDs. You can see there's 47 centered around one location, 38 and 31 in other locations. If you have this app, you can zoom in and see where the AEDs are actually at. You can see if they're restricted or not. For example, if there's an AED that's behind the wall of the police department, somebody's not going to be able to get in there and get it right away, but folks are going to know there's an AED in there, so that might be someplace they go. If it's a building that might be closed at night, it will have that information in there that's not there. The actual location, and you can see the app on the right, shows an AED that somebody has captured for us. That's in Allen Fieldhouse. They snapped a picture of it, and it's always interesting to see the pictures. We want to see it in its surrounding environment, because I have seen pictures that show AEDs from 6 inches away, and that's not the helpful part we want. We want to see where the AED is so we can recognize it in a pinch. But you can see that it has some additional information there. First floor near the gate 11 entrance, right by the ATM. You can actually see the ATM in the picture. That's going to put you in the context of where that AED is at. You see it's restricted access because Allen Fieldhouse is not open all the time. And then it has an address. So if somebody was to be an AED app user and see one out in the wild, they can pull up the app, see if the AED is in there. If not, they can add it very quickly. It's a very simple process. When that's added, we get an email that there's a new AED, and we can go out, make sure the photo looks good, and if not, we can fix that photo. We can actually put it in the building. So this one, if you're to look at an overhead shot of Allen Fieldhouse, will show what entrance it's by. You're going to be able to zoom into Allen Fieldhouse, and you'll see that this is by gate 11. And then we want folks to also know that it's registered in PulsePoint. So we created these stickers, partnered with the PulsePoint Foundation to create stickers that are specific here to Lawrence and Douglas County. And we slap those stickers on the side of the boxes when we see them, the AED cabinets. And there are a couple different apps. Like we mentioned, the AED app is separate if you want to take a look at AEDs in your community. Or you can join the PulsePoint app. And we encourage everyone to join the PulsePoint app. If there is an activation, you're going to get notification of where an AED is at using the PulsePoint app. So you don't have to be in the AED side of it. And there's a QR code there. And we are listed as Lawrence Douglas Co. Kansas. So if you want to follow us, you can see where it's at. That the public information I've always appreciated. I hear a siren, I click on real quick to see where our folks are going. I hear a siren from home and I'll see what's going on because it's usually engine 4 going someplace. At a previous house I lived in, I didn't work in that community, but I was a member of followed them on PulsePoint, and I'd see a big red fire engine going by and I'd like to see where my tax dollars are going, and I'd pull it up and say, okay, they're going to a EMS call downtown, or there's a fire up the street, and just kept me a little bit more connected to my fire department. So we really do encourage folks to download the app. You don't have to know CPR. You can just download it and follow the fire department. If you're willing to provide CPR, that's great. We want everybody to have that opportunity. You don't have to be an expert at it. We just want folks who are willing to try. And thank you for your time, and we're willing to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Now open for questions. Any questions from the commission?
Your QR code worked. I just tried it.
Oh, it didn't work?
It did work.
Oh, it did? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Just a couple questions. Probably, I had it for a while, but then I just realized when I got the thing that I didn't have it on always notified or something, I had to turn on that function. So it's always running in the background, so note to self. I've had it for a while. I've checked it, but I've never got a notification of a CPR. You said it only notifies you that if you're within a quarter.
So it's a quarter mile in
Okay.
a public place. So if
In a
there was something that happened in the lobby here or across the street, you would get a notification. It would ping your phone. If it was a house that's within a quarter mile, you're not going to get it.
Okay. And then just because I like to follow it too, just since you're here, I'll ask you, what does it mean when it says standby?
Great question. So, you want to answer that?
So typically, that's when we're doing a standby for law enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah, or we're just static at a location for numerous reasons, but typically when we're on standby for law enforcement.
And then what does public service mean?
So public service is going to probably change. Our dispatchers left, so this is okay to talk about. With the recent deployment of mobile integrated health, they were using that as public assist or public service, but that's now going to be changed to MIH check. So you'll see MIH check on there. That'll be a mobile integrated health contact. Public service or public assist is typically used by law enforcement. And it's training apparently as well.
Okay. And then I guess I've been surprised how many odor investigations and of course how many lift assists you have. But I assume odor is like I smell gas, come check.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
Typically.
More than I would have thought.
Yeah, so there's places that have valves all over the city and the county, and they're a bleed-off valve, and so if somebody's driving by, the wind's just right, they might smell something, so it can be really any place. It just depends on the wind speed and direction. As far as lift assists go, this county runs a lot of lift assists, which is one of the main topics that Mobile Integrated Health is tackling is lift assists.
Thank you. I think it's a good program.
I have a question, Mayor. So you pointed out 3 different apps, I believe. Community View, the Verified Responder Pro, and the Pulse Point. So all 3 of these are tied to Lawrence emergency system.
Yeah, so Pulse Point Respond is the primary app. That's the one that is going to alert you to CPR needed. Within that app, you have the Community View, which will show you different departments that you can follow. So you can follow LDCFM,
Okay.
you could follow Baldwin City, you could follow other departments in Douglas County that are subscribers, and that's within the Pulse Point Respond app as well. Verified Responder is another aspect of the Pulse Point Respond app that's private. So that's controlled by us. It's a part of the app that is an enhancement, and when we have our responders who want to participate, we get them signed up for that, and that gets them the additional information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from the commission?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very informative. On this, I'll open it up for public comment.
I had a quick question. Let's say something goes out and there's nobody within a quarter of a mile. Can you adjust that? So,
Sir, can you go ahead and address it to us, and we'll go
Sorry
ahead and
about
lay it.
but just want to know if you can adjust that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Just wait, and we'll go ahead and get all public comment, and we'll go ahead and rally them all at the end. Any further public comment in the room? All right. Sherry, any online?
Stephen Watts.
Hi, yeah, this report, Safe and Secure, I wonder, great presentation, but where are the police report? On September 12, 2023, it was announced that the community response partners to participate in Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab Alternatives 911 Information Cohort was going on, and we haven't heard anything about that. Let's see, September, October, November, December, January, February. That was 5 months ago. All right. Back to the fire department and all of these slick, mile-wide, inch-deep reports. It's great that we have that program. Certainly, I may be needing it. I'm old. They say this about old people. But my question for the group is, where are the carbon monoxide detectors and what is going on? You know, on July 20th, 2023, following over 4 years of efforts from me to the police, to the fire department, asking about where is the community distribution of carbon monoxide detectors, which goes on across the United States. I got a response from Chief telling me, hey, it's going to happen. I never heard from the guy again, and then I contacted him in late November only to learn that there was nothing going on, that they were still in its incubatory stage. Carbon monoxide detectors are critical for our community to stop problems. Why can we not be progressive and prevent stuff before it happens? I mean, it's just incredible. Thanks.
That's all the public comment.
Okay. Chief, were you able to go ahead and pick up the couple of those questions? I guess the first one was in terms of the scope and the area.
Yeah, it's a great question. We do have it set by the jurisdiction at a quarter mile. I have seen some jurisdictions, particularly in rural areas, that have expanded that. So they will run it out a half mile is what I've seen, or even longer, because if your population is pretty slow or pretty low, then people are spread out, and so you need that extra distance. But we've set that at a quarter mile here.
Okay.
And then I would like to identify that we have launched the public distribution of carbon monoxide detectors. We're hooked up with the State Fire Marshal's Office through a program that gets us free carbon monoxide detectors to distribute to the community. And we revamped our home fire safety policy over the last 6 months and have instituted changes based on feedback that we got from the public, and including Mr. Watt. So I do appreciate him reaching out, and he's very passionate about that issue, and because of him, that's provided us with a lot of motivation to move forward and get that done. We have announced that on a couple of posts on Facebook, and so we've tried to make that announcement into the public.
Thanks, Chief. That's great to hear. Any closing comments on this?
No, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chief, and thank you to all the folks that work in the fire department, and for that update and all your hard work on this app. Hopefully, it will save a lot of people's lives. All right. Moving on to item G, regular agenda items. Consider approving the raise grant concept for the Lawrence Loop Trail, Kaw River, 7th Street to Constant Park Project PR 5-B23003, and authorizing the city manager to sign the letter of funding commitment. Thank you all.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Mark Hecker. I'm Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. With me tonight to do the help with the presentation, we have Jessica Mordenshire from MPO, and Jake Baldwin is our project engineer for this particular project. This is a project I'm pretty excited about. It connects a piece of the Lawrence Loop from 7th Street over to Constant Park. And as you know, if you've been involved with the Lawrence Loop conversation over the years, this is a very difficult portion of that trail loop. So what we're going to do tonight is kind of take you backwards a little bit, then bring you forwards. We're looking at potential of a raised grant to fund this portion of the trail. It not only connects point A to point B, but it also includes maybe some arts components that maybe make it a little extraordinary project. And that with federal funding, we think we have the ability to really take this to the next level and make it a really downtown, marquee piece. So I'm going to walk you through this, and then these two are going to tag in on me, and I'll step backwards. So just real quick overview, we'll do a project background, then we'll look at the community engagement we've done to this point. We'll look at the raised grant application, which is basically written, ready to be submitted with your approval, recommendations, and then next steps. So this is where I'm going to take you backwards a little bit. So this is the total Lawrence Loop. I wanted to define for you that we have been very successful. I was counting all the segments before I came tonight. We've done 12 segments of this trail as we've went around the city. It started back in 1998 and has progressed through to today. The things we're looking at now, if you're wondering, 7th Street. So right this summer, there'll be a very small project that goes from 8th Street to 7th Street. That gets us to the Santa Fe Station over here. So the next project is go Santa Fe Station. How do we get through downtown, around downtown? What's our route to get to Constant Park to hook to the Bircham Trail down by the river? So that's the project we're working on. On the map, here's this little orange section. If we're able to complete that, we'll basically be complete from Queens Road all the way out north, all the way around the city up to what would be basically Sandershaw Park. So we're getting close. There's a big segment out northwest, which is a future CIP project. That one isn't as hard to get through. It's a longer piece that will require a lot of creek crossings and that sort of stuff. Then there's the little red section there that goes from Michigan Street over to Sandershaw. That one's been designed. We're in basically property acquisition stages of that one. So we're getting really, really close, and that's what's exciting about this. You know, I've been working on this for, gosh, probably almost 20 years, and seeing this get so close to complete is pretty darn exciting. As we develop these trail sections, we always do the same thing. We look at point A to point B, where are we trying to go? We try to identify the routes, and then we try to identify funding sources. A lot of the other sections of the trail has been built with KDOT transportation grants and or Sunflower grants. So this one's the first one that I know of that we've done federal funding on, and that's what's kind of exciting about this project. So to take you back a little bit, this project's been studied for a number of years. So it goes all the way back to 2017. We did an alignment study. So if you look at this little graphic here, this was the postcard that was sent out as part of that alignment study. It identified 2 sections, and we've made progress on both of those sections. So we were able to get from, you know, this piece here gets from 11th Street. Now we're all the way up to 8th Street. So there's a smaller section. This is that other red section we talked about earlier. So the study of this section has been a 7-year process, multiple different public engagement sessions, multiple different groups looked at it. In 2020, we had some folks in the community that basically took this on and said, hey, we think we can come up with some ideas. So they've ran through a lot of just impromptu public conversation about multiple ways to go. What we're doing here with Hireling, Bartlett, and West, we're able to define the scope, bring the scope down, define something that's able to be applied for with this grant application. So I feel like the process has been a good and a long process. In looking at how do we tie the strategic plan, so Connected City talks specifically about trail connectivity. Unmistakable identity, if we can get into the arts piece of this, I think that really ties these two together into this whole project. We know we want to connect to downtown, we know we want to connect to the river. That, to me, makes a really interesting connectivity thing that we don't have right now. Right now, you can go over the bridges, but you can't really interact with the river. So we know the Bircham River Trail is one of our most popular trails just because we're running alongside the river. We want to be able to connect from downtown down to that river in a safe manner by getting over the train tracks and down to that area. So where we are now, we've basically done quite a bit of community engagement. We have a concept design ready. We have a raise grant ready. So we're looking for your approval to move it forward. After that, we'll go into, if we get the grant, we'll go to final design, construction design, and move the project forward from there. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Jake.
Good evening. So as Mark indicated, the first phase of the work is really geared towards submission of a raised capital grant. That was the recommendation of the city's grant consultant, TFG, and that was communicated to our steering committee at their first meeting, and as well as the public at the first open house. RAISE stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, and as you can see on the slide, really the objective of that program is to produce surface transportation projects with significant impacts that also meet the department's goals of improving safety, connectivity, mobility, having economic impact, impacting areas of persistent poverty, as well as impacting climate and sustainability. We also wanted to point out that really the focus of the RAISE program, and we've seen this through successful communities near us is in bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So and the reason I say that is with elections this fall, federal elections, there's the potential that could change. And again, I say that because in the past, this program has been known as Tiger or Build, and it had a focus on large highway transportation projects and not the bike and pedestrian infrastructure focus that we've seen recently.
We began this process last year when the City Commission established a steering committee to pursue planning on this CIP project to really talk about how we're going to connect this section of the loop. The steering committee met and we went through this public process. We're going to talk a little bit more about it as we go through this, but you can probably recognize right away that we're on a short timeline, and that's the reality of a raised grant application process that was also moved up compared to where it had been in previous years. And so that impacted some of the process that we ended up in as we went through that process with negotiating an agreement with our consultant and beginning the work with the steering committee. The steering committee is made up of stakeholders that represent some diverse stakeholder perspectives in relationship to this project in the community. They were advised to work. Their mission is to advise and review and provide feedback to the consultants and staff through this process. We began with them at the first meeting to really lay out, both with the first steering committee and public meeting, to understand the values and describe the process we hope to embark on this journey. And we engaged the steering committee and then the public in this conversation. It was a very visionary first meeting where it presented the consultants' big vision from Kaw River Commons and many of the design choices that they had been working on as community advocates prior to being hired as our consultants. We asked people to give us feedback about where they thought there were opportunities and on elements of the design that they thought could weave in some of the unmistakable identity components that we previously discussed in the strategic plan interest, but also knowing that this is a unique and special spot for our community. Out of that public feedback, we had about 78 people at the meeting and collected 51 comment forms, and we really heard about these three topics. We heard from the mom with the toddler traversing the bridge and the fear of the railings and concerns of safety. We heard a lot about the increased desire for bicycle and pedestrian safety and removing at-grade intersection crossings, particularly the ones right outside of our building. We heard about connectivity and the interest to connect North Lawrence and the river and access to the river and downtown, including thinking about, our expanded central business district and how it connects across the parts of the river. We heard about then the identity, and that was a piece that was ingrained into this project, and we asked people how they thought we could make it unmistakable, and we showed them a bunch of examples of other bike ped infrastructure and asked for their opinion about different types of unmistakable pieces. And so we heard about how the desire to make it unique to Lawrence, thinking about it as a cycling destination, inclusion of the arts and indigenous imagery. We came back to the steering committee and we had the results of that summary of comment from open house, and we brought that back to the committee. And we had a conversation with them to narrow the concepts, recognizing that the raised grant had limitations in terms of the desires they're looking for in terms of project selection and scoring, and also to recognize where are we at in terms of scope and scale of this project. The CIP project was closing the loop. There's additional interest in this area around crossing the Kaw and clearing the railway. In terms of comment, we heard about safety in both of those opportunities and thought it would be a great opportunity to really think about the concepts as they applied in these three different ways. The committee really set as the priority that desire to close the loop, but recognizing there's two other components in this project, and we talk about them as such, and I'll let Jake walk through those.
Thanks. So again, the goal of the second steering committee meeting was to narrow the concepts, the myriad of concepts that were presented to the steering committee and the public at previous meetings, and use the feedback we gained from the community in that exercise. And that exercise was completed really in a discussion of three parts, being close the loop, cross the Kaw, and clear the rail. So in this first slide of closing the loop, the steering committee looked at a couple different alignments, a street alignment and a river alignment. The street alignment was considered to be less expensive, more connected to downtown. It's also more urban and thus has more conflict points with vehicles. Whereas the river alignment was considered to be more expensive, less connected to downtown, less urban, but also less of those conflict points. And it also utilizes some completed design plans that we've got for a portion of that alignment. The steering committee took all that information in and really came to a place where they were supportive of both of these options. So later on in that discussion, we kind of brought it into a budgetary discussion as well to see how the pieces of the puzzle fit together within the ultimate ask of the grant, and came to the realization that both of these options could be supported within the financial constraints of the grant. And so that's where the steering committee ended up, is supporting both of these alignments. The second part of that discussion, again, was to cross the CAW, and the steering committee considered 4 alignments for a bike pedestrian bridge across the Kansas River, 2 being upstream and 2 downstream. The 4th and 3rd Street being downstream were considered to have greater neighborhood connectivity. They're in a natural river section, but also have a limited downtown connectivity. We also noted that 4th Street crossing was also in close proximity to an existing at-grade signalized rail crossing on New York Street. Moving upstream of the dam, we've got a 2nd Street and a Vermont Street alignment. Those were considered to have greater potential for downtown connectivity. They are, however, on a non-natural river section and don't currently provide an ADA compliant pathway to the neighborhoods in North Lawrence. So staff indicated that if we wanted to go with an upstream option, we'd also want to include that ADA compliant connection to the neighborhoods, and you see that represented by the dashed line and the aerial there. Last thing to note there is 2nd Street alignment is underneath the existing bridges, so it wasn't terribly desirable, and that kind of played into our discussion. Making some generalizations about that discussion, there was a lot of support to not have a bridge at this time downstream because of the undesirable effect it have on the natural river aesthetic. The other generalizations were thinking upstream of the Vermont in particular, that alignment. It provided greater access to destinations in downtown area such as the pool, the library, post office, and city hall. And then through that discussion, the steering committee at that time, again, unanimously supported the Vermont Street alignment. However, as we go on in the discussion, you'll see that unanimous support did change, and we'll note that. And then the last third piece of the exercise was how to clear the rail. So again, we were looking at the steering committee to provide guidance on where to do a grade separated crossing of the railroad, noting that there's already, again, that existing crossing on New York Street that is at grade and signalized. So we really focused on the 2 areas of Robinson Park and Constant Park. Both areas really offer kind of the same benefits and positives and negatives, I should say. However, Constant Park really got a little bit more support, and I think that's mainly because the physical space is there offers a greater flexibility in design and options in how to achieve the goal of this part of the project. So again, at the end of the meeting, these were the concepts that were narrowed down by the steering committee. 2 options to close the loop, the street and river alignment. 1 option to cross the CAW on Vermont Street, and the concept of clearing the rail there at the at Constant Park, pardon me. However, we did receive new information after that 2nd steering committee meeting, and staff met with representatives of Bowersock Mills and Power Company. They're on site to review the conflict that was brought up, and you kind of can see that in the picture on the right-hand side. So that's the general vicinity that the concept would put a bike and pedestrian bridge over the dam underneath the highway bridges and land at Constant Park. But however, because of the tower and cable and trolley system that are utilized in the operations of the dam in terms of the bladder and other components, it really is a kind of a physical conflict that we felt wouldn't be overcome by what we had proposed. So you'll see down in the left picture, the area of red was removed from the narrowed concepts as being unfeasible. We communicated this information to the steering committee and promised to bring that discussion back up at the next meeting to answer any questions they might have. And we also indicated that we wanted to bring these concepts still to the public at the planned public meeting to get the feedback on these other viable concepts.
So we go into open house number 2, and we went back with these revised concepts. And that has the steering committee's recommendation minus the part that we had to remove. That's what we ended up presenting to the public. In a perfect world, maybe you would have had more time to go back and do another steering committee meeting before you went out, but we found this out like 5 days before the steering committee meeting, so we weren't able to do that. We're in this open house 2. And we had about 45 participants at the meeting, and we did also 6 hours of tabling at the Lawrence Public Library in the lobby to inform people of the project. And we collected 78 comment forms on the project. Again, we really framed the feedback that we received around these 3 topic areas, recognizing that we're now in an alignment with a street-only path. We focus back on safety and the desire to address the crossings and the conflict points in the street options. So we heard mention of crosswalks and other improvements that they're hoping for in terms of the more urban alignment that was going to be selected to close the loop. We heard a lot again about the conviction and the interest in the North Lawrence connection. And in here we saw a lot of vital differences. In general, there was still a lot of general support for the project, but there were differences in the preferred alignment at this point, based on a 4th Street bridge or a Vermont Street bridge is what we heard of. We even had some proposals for completely differently scoped projects and alternative routes that went outside of the project study area where we're looking at closing the loop. Again, we asked people about how the identity is and things that they wanted us to consider as we think about design in a future project. And there really is a desire to think about highly visible and attractive and safe infrastructure that can identify us as part of our bicycle and pedestrian culture. We then went back to the steering committee and again took them the results of the second open house summary that we had and all of the comments and feedback that we had. And we went back and had this discussion to share with them the river alignment and the summary of feedback. At this point, they had a lot of questions and concerns in the process about where we were and what options we had to proceed and move forward. And at the end of the meeting and the conversation, they resulted in a decision of 7-2 to recommend the narrowed concepts. They knew that their recommendation was being forwarded to the Multi-modal Transportation Commission. We again went back to that conversation February 5th, really recently, with the Multi-modal Transportation Commission, where we presented the recommended narrowed concepts and received a 3-2 decision from them to support submission of the RAISE grant for the proposed components. We believe this project is compelling and competitive to the RAISE process. Each of these elements are consistent and supported in the Metropolitan Planning Organization's adopted transportation plans, so bicycle, pedestrian, safe routes to school plans, and they support elements that are consistent with the strategic goals. We believe that they speak well and score well in cost-benefit analysis because they do remove connections for bike ped that maybe are currently being made at street grade that can then be put in separated facilities. They tie together 2 parts of our central business district. This project is located in an area in our community that's impacted with persistent poverty according to the RAISE grant criteria. And the hope in this project, and with lots of bicycle and pedestrian project, is the impact that it has to attract users to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And those are consistent with many of the goals that we talk about in our strategic plan as well.
And I can be real brief on this slide. It's really just a representation of the individual cost estimates of the pieces of the narrowed concept. So added all together, you've got a total ask in the grant of $20.7 million, which is underneath the maximum ask in the grant of $25 million.
Just a little bit of a summary slide so you can see the various public engagements we had and how we walked through the process. The next step is speaking with City Commission. Our goal is to submit the RAISE grant by the end of the month, so we're on a pretty tight timeline. But with that, I would stand for any questions that any of us could help you with.
All right, at this time I'll open it up for questions.
A question. You said that you talked about the crossings meeting all of our bike ped plans, our multimodal plans. This particular drawing, that the last one that we saw, do the other locations also meet those various plans that we have?
I think in terms of all of the stuff that was proposed, whether it was the 4th Street crossing or the Vermont crossing, we would say that was consistent with the plans in terms of the element for the crossing, as well as completing the loop. There are many sections, I think, that have been in plans over the years to do that. I think part where we thought didn't meet the intention of the plan is at the second public meeting, there was a community proposed alternative route that would have paved the levee, would have built a bridge and paved the levee all the way out to I-70 and built another bridge. And that's something that would not have been supported by the plans.
Just paving it all the way to I-70 or just any pavement at all?
Well, we have nothing in our plans to talk about paving the levee at all, and we do not have another river bridge crossing at I-70. So there would have been other elements. The loop has never been planned in that context. It has always been planned as a smaller connection in terms of the context of where we've been looking at in terms of scoping this project. So that would have been way outside of the scope. It would have negated the 2 projects we've more recently done around some of the Sandra Shaw and the McGrew Nature Trail components that became part of the loop. I think those would now be like a loop within the loop. We've spent a lot of additional money and resources in that space, prioritizing what is called the priority bikeway network in the bikeway plan, and those components are outside of that.
Okay. But the locations that were shown earlier in the slides, there were 3 or 4 or 5 different locations. I didn't see it going to I-70 at all.
No, and I think I was just trying to say, there was other stuff mentioned in the process that people spoke to in the public comments. So if you read additional, I didn't mean to confuse the issue, but if you read additional comment or saw the results of the feedback, people were still looking outside of even the scope we were talking about. But I think as far as the bikeway plan is concerned, any of those alignments that we were talking about to make those connections, we would consider in context with the bicycle and pedestrian plans.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just one more question. Jake, you had indicated that the one of the downstream locations, proposed locations early on, one of the reasons not to do it there was that it would negatively impact the natural aesthetics of the river or something like that? I might have got that wrong.
Yes, that was the discussion of the steering committee. I think it was more of maybe a viewpoint from upstream, looking downstream on that natural river section and seeing a pedestrian bridge, and that just wasn't desirable.
Okay, but the upstream one that's being proposed here it does not impact the aesthetic of the river.
It's hard for me to speak, I guess, from what the steering committee was trying to convey in that thought. But I think, from that location, if you're looking downstream, you're going to see the existing highway bridges, but you would not see another bridge down in the natural river section. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Commissioner.
Yeah, I couldn't understand why one way would be aesthetically not pleasing versus the other way.
So let's go back to these concepts, as we were talking about crossing the Kaw with the committee, we presented these ideas in terms of high-level concepts to think about in terms of neighborhood connectivity or commercial business connectivity or all of these different options. And the committee vetted all of those, and after that second steering committee, they landed on a Vermont Street option very clearly to us. There was no dissent or conversation about, can we take 2 bridges to the public and see which one they prefer. It was very much in consensus around submitting the Vermont Street Bridge as the proposal, and that was we presented this, and that was the conversation. And so it was surprising to us that after the additional feedback from the next series of open houses, that there was a changing of opinion in regards to that, because it was very, there was nobody who spoke against proposing the Vermont Street alignment at the second steering committee.
But at the third one, the vote was
Yes.
7-2.
Yes.
So there was some dissent.
They're correct. That happened between the conversations of the change that had to be made based on the new information, the public meeting and the sentiment that was collected in terms of thinking about it from the North Lawrence neighborhood connectivity, I think, and that made people probably just enlightened them more about the differing perspectives and values that people had around thinking which alignment would be a better for their personal interest in that process.
Okay. And one more question. The final plan that you're proposing, I see a dotted line going or a dashed line going across 6th Street. So you're expecting bicyclists and whoever's walking to get downtown to cross 6th Street at that very busy intersection?
Yeah, what we're trying to do there is get to one of the signalized crosswalks. So, you know, that area is very congested in there. But yeah, the idea is to get across 6th Street to get to the pool, to get to the park, get to downtown. So that was the concept. You could also cross, if you chose to, you could cross more over by City Hall and cross into downtown if that's where you're going. It's kind of hard to get a concept of where people are coming from and where they're going to on this, but we wanted to provide opportunities that got you close to downtown. So depending on which street you want to jump off, you know, if you wanted to continue down 7th Street, you could, as opposed to kind of heading towards the river. But
Okay. But the safety aspect is what I'm thinking about. Was there ever any consideration to do a walking bridge across there?
that was one of the early concepts, to do a flyover 6th Street. That was kind of eliminated early just because of the expense of it, and basically all it did was fly you over 6th Street. So I remember it was a series of purple lines going over 6th Street, which I kind of like, but others didn't.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Question, obviously the river path was a popular path, and I guess it seems like to me almost anything can be solved with money. I mean, if there was 21 to 24 million, couldn't you consider moving the trolley or consider a way to get rid of that problem point and complete the river path?
I think that's certainly a conversation. When we talked with the Bower Sox folks, they said that was an integral part of their operation. So we didn't push it beyond that point as to if there was other options. I know there's potential to do it somehow, but I don't know what the cost would be.
I don't know what the raise application itself looks like. I mean, could you put the river completion in there, and then, you know, if it later becomes unfeasible, you couldn't do it? Or how does the process work?
So you're talking about the flying over the dam one?
Yes.
Okay. Jessica, do you know on the grant itself if we can present options that may or may not be feasible?
So I can't necessarily speak to that exactly, but I think the more speculation you have in the grant, you have to prove to the federal government that you have a reasonable assumption that you can complete the projects that you're proposing to do. And in the nature of a capital grant, that means that you are on the process to doing that. I think the more speculation that you create in your grant, the more questions you create. Sure. So the bigger challenge is the other part of that, and is it impacts the cost benefit analysis. So the higher the project costs go up and the difference in the benefit, if the benefit is not also even raised, then you have a less desirable cost benefit analysis that impacts the project. So those are just two variables that I think we continued to think about as we were thinking about how do we make a competitive grant selection in that process. I think I wasn't involved in all the conversations with property owners, and I don't know what happened there besides to decide that it wasn't viable to move forward, and we continue to try to make the best decisions as we progressed in this process. Does that answer? I mean.
I guess I'll leave it now there for the questions, but obviously there's been a lot of discussion at Multi-modal about switching to a planning grant instead of a actual grant, and I wasn't quite sure on the answers I saw at Multi-modal, but tell us about the possibility there.
Yeah. Staff does not believe at this point in the process pivoting to a planning grant is feasible. Our contract with Bartlett and West explicitly states that the scope of work is for a raised capital grant. And so it would be unusual of us to re-amend that in that agreement and change the course of work that we've negotiated in the short time frame that we have, recognizing that the first contract negotiations took almost 2 months for us to come to terms with that. So we didn't feel like that was a viable option. Additionally, when we began this process of scoping the loop project for the CIP, the staff team spoke with the grant consultants, TFG, our previous grant consultants, and they advised us based when we described the project to them and where we had been in the project history, they advised us they didn't think it would compete very well as a planning grant, and that they thought if we, based on the desired in terms of timeline also for construction and the goals to complete the loop, that instead pursuing local planning efforts like the one we have just done and spent money on, and with a public process, then could be put us in a situation to apply for a construction grant to actually build something. We feel like that public process, we realize there's other adjacent areas that have interest in terms of the relationship and proximity to this loop grant, but we're not sure really about how additional capacity in terms of exploring other development or other interests in terms of timing of other downtown projects and other things. Some of that goes beyond the nature of RAISE, and so we're not sure because that was never included in the scope of what the original project is and what got agreed to in terms of the contract negotiations. So at our point in the last few weeks, knowing we are already so in the process to review and get feedback back for the actual submission of a construction grant, we did not feel like it's a viable option to renegotiate and to pursue a planning grant.
Okay.
Mr. Finkelstein?
No other questions at the moment.
Yeah, I'm good for now.
If you want to go.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick. Just one tag along to that. I noticed another thing that might have been brought up was in its current alignment, the Vermont Street one, it was near the Evergy facility. I wonder if any talks had begun with them regarding that or any plan to?
Yeah, we've met with Evergy to discuss the feasibility of the project. Obviously, at a concept level, we don't know a lot of the details, but in that conversation, we did work out that the project was feasible in their eyes for what we were trying to achieve.
Okay.
Okay, one more question for you. So I watched the steering committee and the multimodal, and I can't remember which meeting it was spoken at. I want to go back to the concrete situation. And it seemed to me, I remember staff saying that one of the reasons we couldn't do the down gradient was because we can't pave the levee. And afterwards, I got to thinking, I said, well, to myself, I was thinking, well, you're going to have to pave something on the west side too. So can you explain to me a little bit better?
And that was an erroneous statement that I made at that meeting based on guidance and feedback I had from talking to internal staff, knowing that the requirements to pave the levee have a lot more heightened process and requirements about maintenance and other considerations. And so in relation to, yes, there will need to be a process to pave the levee for the part of getting ADA access back to a street network, particularly on the North Lawrence side of the levee, and how we do that hadn't been worked out yet in the 4th Street alignment, because we just began to show that in the Vermont Street alignment as part of the realization from a lot of the really conceptual stuff. You get down and you start to look and as you get into design, into the nuts and bolts of costing stuff. So yes, that was an erroneous statement based on feedback and guidance I'd heard. I've also in our bikeway plan, we've always shown that as a crushed gravel trail, and so that's never something that's been in our plans to pave a larger section of the levee as we talk about it. And I said that in context to the part speaking about from the Vermont Street Bridge all the way out to I-70, that's never been part of our priority or part of our bikeway planning.
Okay. So I just wonder if, I think it was a steering committee that was said, I think. I wonder if there would have been potentially a different outcome if if the steering committee knew that, no, that can be paved, because that was given a reason as to why that location was not appropriate. So I'm a little.
Yeah, and I think in relationship to the 4th Street Bridge, if we're just talking about the River Bridge being instead of at Vermont at 4th Street, I think the question back to us was, well, how do you make that ADA connection back to the network? And I think even our consultant got up and spoke at that point and just mentioned that we hadn't done that due diligence and work because they had chose a Vermont Street alignment, so we didn't proceed to go back and assess where the connectivity and how that would be done back to the ADA, back to the street network. I hope we didn't imply ever that we would leave a bridge connection without ADA access. That was one of our early conversations in that regard, is that we will need to pave something to get back to a street network for connectivity. So you're right, there's a lot of points of information at different points in the process, or when we had information and how it was presented that impacted the outcome of this process. And maybe it would have been different, maybe not, but it's hard to speculate at this point in time.
I get that. Thank you.
And just to clarify, if you can repeat, after that second steering committee meeting, the Vermont Street Bridge what was the vote on that, or what was
They didn't take an official vote,
Okay.
But there was nobody who said still the 4th Street option. They had a conversation and there was general unanimous agreement that the Vermont Street option was the selected option. There was not one. We've had this conversation as staff later. Did anybody have any comments that should have led us to a place where we took 2 bridge alignments to the public to ask their preference? Because we would have set ourselves up in that way if that's what we would have thought the steering committee was moving towards. No one at that point in time was recommending a 4th Street alignment, so we did not continue to pursue that based on the advice and feedback from that group.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions?
Not this time.
Okay. I will open this up to public, thank you all, public comment.
Mayor, could we take a
Good evening.
I apologize. I think we need to take a quick break. Sure. So if you can hold out for about 10 minutes. Thank you very much. I'll take a quick break. We'll be back at 7:26. We all good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll bring us back. And I believe we left off with public comment. So, all right. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and read a written statement that I prepared earlier. My name is Jared Gobb, and I live in the Deerfield neighborhood. I am co-founder of the Sunday Chug, a weekly cycling group ride. A weekly cycling group ride in Lawrence. 700 area cyclists subscribe to our ride announcements and have access to our library of over 200 unique cycling routes, which all begin and end downtown. I have watched the meetings preceding this one on the topic of this proposed design. I attended the public info session on this design. I submitted feedback and suggestions on the alignments. Now, I urge you to deny the raised grant concept for the Lawrence Loop Trail, Kaw River, 7th Street to Constant Park project as it is presented to you. The design process lacked critical site studies, failed to engage with impacted parties, and was dismissive of public suggestions, citing an approaching deadline. Justification for the chosen alignment was based on inaccurate information and assumptions, and failed to consider broader implications of the design, which ultimately, in my opinion, do not meet grant criteria. The proposed alignments in this project design fall short of meaningfully serving anyone. A pedestrian bridge at the same location as another bridge that allows for pedestrian traffic is redundant. The surface path through downtown creates more dangerous situations than it solves and should not be adopted as a legitimate solution for completing the loop. I fear that if this is approved tonight and somehow is awarded funding from the grant, the city will be obligated to build according to this alignment and be stuck with decades of maintenance and repair costs with no meaningful return. The process leading up to this point and insufficient study has failed to generate a design for our community that has real positive impact. This grant is not the last opportunity for Lawrence to build great cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. Direct the appropriate groups to open this back up to study and find other sources for funding. I see it much harder to gain public support for future projects if the city decides to waste $20.7 million on this. Thank you.
All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ted Boyle, North Lawrence Improvement Association. I'd like to say that last night was our NLIA meeting, neighborhood meeting, and the topic of discussion was this pedestrian bridge. Now, about it's been 8 or 9 years ago, I saw the first rendering of a pedestrian bridge right in this building downstairs. And when the stormwater engineer used to be down there, and it was over here on coming off the parking lot of the east end of the Marriott and connecting over to Walnut Park levee over there. And that was a rendering, and at the bottom of the page it said no funding available until 2024. And so we've been talking about it over North Lawrence, and we thought that was a positive move. Well, then these other ideas came up from these retired architects on this catastrophic mistake that they're looking at, especially the first three renderings, and then this last one. And for the money, it's just not worth the money, and it doesn't benefit North Lawrence in any way. It's just a showpiece somebody can brag about. And what we think, at our meeting last night, we had posted 3 options. One, the proposed pedestrian bridge west of the existing bridge, modifying the existing bridges, and then downstream. And downstream, there used to be railroad bridge go across from this side of the river about the Amtrak over to 4th Street. The pilings used to be still in the river. So there used to be a bridge right there, and it was converted into a railroad and wagon and pedestrian at the time. So what we talked about last night, we gave the group options of which ones they would prefer. And either modifying the bridge here, which would be putting cantilevers on the sides of the bridge to make the pedestrian walkway wider and bicycle efficient, plus covering it with a canopy, especially on the traffic side, and then on the river side have open screening for view of the river, because the view of the river from the bridge is pretty darn spectacular. And you know, you see a lot of people up there photographing and taking pictures and that type of deal. And the cost for doing that would be probably half, if not more, less than this proposed monstrosity that they want to build. So anyway, we hope you reject this plan.
I'm sorry I did not rehearse for this or write a speech ahead of time. I just jotted down some notes to give you my impressions of what I witnessed with this proposal. It kind of looks like an equation. It's like 2 + 2 is supposed to equal 5. From what the proposal that you have here, it looks more like a boondoggle than anything, because most of the people in North Lawrence live east of the dam, not west of the dam. So it doesn't make any sense to put it over there. To me, it makes a lot more sense to put it east of the dam. East of the dam, you got parking, as you know, over there between 2nd and 3rd Street. And if you stand on the levee and look over, I think this goes along with what Ted was talking about, you can see a straight path right over the river to the causeway that comes out here by where the municipal court is on the east side of that Marriott Hotel. It's on, you're on grade, you don't have any change in elevation, you're ADA compliant. If you could build a bridge that went from 3rd Street through that causeway and out to the corner of 6th and New Hampshire, to me that seems like that would be a marquee, very identifying feature of downtown Lawrence. If not that, really any bridge east of the dam would be more of a service to the residents of North Lawrence than something to the west of the dam. I suppose if you have a bridge west of the dam, people are still just going to use the current cement bridge that we have now, which I don't know how many of you, I imagine a lot of you have probably walked it, but it's not comfortable, especially when the traffic's heavy and the snow and the dirt and the grits flying up at your face as traffic goes by. But I would like to see a bridge from North Lawrence to downtown. I've lived here for over 20 years and thinking, well, now I'm retired. I thought by the time I'd be retired, there'd be one. And there isn't. But hopefully there will be one before I die of old age. So yes, I would just turn down this grant application and go back to the drawing board and hope Biden gets reelected so he'll have grant money to, you know, apply for later on. Thank you very much. Oh, and go bold, go LFK.
Good evening. My name is Will Schultz. I'm a KU student. I've lived in Lawrence my entire life, 21 long years. I've worked at Sunflower Outdoor and Bike Shops since I was 15 years old. I started the Free State High School Cycling Club, was instrumental in helping start the High School Cycling League in the state of Kansas. I just hope tonight that you guys consider denying this proposal. I can assure you that the current bridge that would be placed west of the current one would not serve anyone, as Jared and your gentleman over there previously stated. A bridge going over 4th Street or a bridge paralleling I-70 from north of the hospital to North Lawrence would serve a wider range of people, and I just hope you guys consider that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nate Clark. I live over in North Lawrence. I've been biking between North Lawrence and downtown for almost 10 years. I started up here in the BZA for 7 years, and last year the North Lawrence Improvement Association asked me to serve on the steering committee for this closing section of the loop. So I'm speaking to you a little bit as someone who's been in these processes for the last 4 months, but also as a private citizen. A few comments that I'd like to make. One is around the timing of this. I agree that the timing, people have been talking about this for many years. It's been a dream in my heart for a while. The steering committee was established last summer. Our committee meetings did not start until just later in the year. I believe our first one was in November, and our second one was in January, and our third one was just a few weeks ago. And so while it has been in process for a long time, there's been a lot of rush. And it was between that second and third committee that there was a pretty significant change that we were forced to reconcile during that third meeting. As far as safety of the proposed plan, without the river alignment option, the current plan for the closing of the loop, in my opinion, is no different than what the loop is right now. People will still be required to navigate downtown. They'll be required to go through kind of a cityscape, deal with crossings, deal with public streets, deal with cars right there. And that does not align with my mental model of the rest of the loop. I think about out there by Clinton Lake, where there's just miles of straight, clear access, no cars, nobody kind of coming in behind you on any of that stuff. And so from a safety perspective, I don't view the view of the city alignment as a closing of the loop. And similar to public comment earlier, the idea of this being an unmistakable Lawrence, a compelling and competitive design bid, a third pedestrian bridge just a stone's throw away from an existing 2 other pedestrian bridges, and the second promenade just a stone's throw away from an existing promenade. As far as some interesting comments around the approval recommendations from the steering committee and the Multi-modal Transportation Committee, after the second steering committee, our unanimous decision during the second one was based on the totality of the selected alignments. We elected those because they were all there and they're together, and that later changed when the river alignment was broken in half. The 7 of the 2 steering committee, my general take on the vibe in the room was time is short, we don't want to miss out on the money opportunity, and because of the direction from the staff, we were forced to make a quick decision without change. In regards to the 3-2 vote of the Multi-modal Transportation Committee, I will defer to Commissioner Reese's comment, which is available on that transcript, or public comment, which you said, like, I am supporting this today because I sat on that committee. Next week, if this goes through, I will testify as a private citizen against this. And so I am recommending that you do not approve this and you deny the raise grant.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Chris Tilden. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. First, I want to recognize that Parks and Rec, the MPO, MSO have done a tremendous amount of work over the years to advance our trail system, and they certainly need to be commended for their work. This was a process that unfortunately ended up being rushed. I was on the steering committee representing Lovewell Douglas County. I'm speaking as a private citizen this evening. While there was a 7-2 vote, there were actually 5 of us that evening, including the 2 who voted against, and 3 who voted for, because as Nate said, we felt the need, we want to move forward. I mean, I want to see us submit something for a raise grant opportunity, voted for, but 3 of us that voted for that evening said an eastern alignment is much preferable because the package in totality had been changed significantly. There were 17 pages of public comment that were provided to us the day before the steering committee. I'm guessing that not all 9 members of the steering committee had an opportunity to read through those comments. Those have been characterized in many places, including the Journal World, as mostly positive, but if you look through those, there are a lot of comments suggesting there were concerns, particularly about the bridge alignment. I do want to comment on the planning versus the raise grant. I can't say, what is feasible at this point, but my interpretation of what I heard from Scott Cormorant, Bartlett and West, who is heading up the team, is that pivoting to a planning grant is a feasible option. And gosh, I would have been the first one at the end of steering committee 2 saying, we're all on the same page. We voted it unanimously to move forward. By steering committee 3, I had concerns. I think there are still concerns about what is the optimal alignment if we submit a capital grant and it's approved. Like we're faced with construction of an alignment that I think there's still some uncertainty about. So, for a variety of reasons, it ended up being a rush process. That's not entirely the fault of staff, or probably even, the federal grant submission was actually moved up. There was new information found in advance of the steering committee by a week or so. And as such, I'd love to have discussion about the potential of submitting a planning grant rather than the capital improvement grant. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sarah Hill Nelson, and I was an original founder of Friends of Lawrence Area Trails, and I'm also a property owner in the vicinity of the proposed project. And if you take one thing away from what I have to say tonight, I hope it's you walk away with the thought that we can do better as a community. I think the potential for the river as a connector and an attraction is significant, and an opportunity like that should be leveraged wisely. So I think a raised planning grant, which I also am under the understanding from multiple sources we still have the opportunity to pivot to a raised planning grant, would allow us to consider the full range of options and conduct a process that is collaborative and reflects what is actually attainable. So why do we need a planning grant? I think it's important to acknowledge that many pieces of the current proposal are not viable as they stand today. And if you look at the map, which we don't have available, I don't know if anyone can throw the map up, but the downstream path was described by the contractor as shovel-ready. However, as a neighbor there, I was involved in getting approval for that downstream path, and I can tell you that the neighbors whose approval is required for that downstream path, which is still on the application, have refused to approve that. So that section of the grant actually is not shovel-ready, and it can and should not be submitted for approval because the property owners have not agreed. The second part is the portion of the project wrapping around the Evergy substation. I know as a person that's involved in energy infrastructure that you have to have significant setbacks for any kind of transmission like that. I did hear Jake Baldwin say he didn't see that that would be a significant impact, but if you look at the drawings, it's really important to notice how close those paths go to that substation. And if you spend any time boots on the ground in that substation area, you realize that's a very complex problem that they're trying to solve there. Any changes they make are going to have to be significant, and the public will have not had the opportunity to vet any of those changes. Finally, the bridge, and this was already brought up by the community, but the bridge does land on the levee, and the steering committee was advised, if you watch the steering committee, there were many people that were leaning towards the 4th Street alignment, and they were advised by city staff that that alignment was not possible because the levee could not have concrete on it. We now know that that, in fact, is not accurate, but unfortunately for steering committee members who were advised in that meeting, they then had to pivot because they were advised that wasn't an option. So they then pivoted to the upstream based on information that was not accurate. So how did we get here? I would say I'm concerned about the lack of consultation. Bowersock expressed early and often that that alignment option was not possible, and I don't understand why that wasn't communicated. Spring Hill Suites wasn't consulted, Simons weren't consulted, Abe and Jake's wasn't consulted, Evergy wasn't consulted, KU Rowing, and the North Lawrence. I hope we can do better. Thank you.
Hello, Courtney Shipley. I'm excited to agree with Sarah Hill Nelson. I think the planning grant would be doable at this time. I think the best person to ask about that would be Bartlett and West. Many of you know it hurts my heart to disagree with staff, but I feel that asking Bartlett and West specifically if they can pivot to a planning grant at this time, you would get a favorable answer. In addition, I think that would clarify a lot of the concerns of the community, and I definitely think there are some serious questions about who owns what. The land, as far as I know, of all those properties belongs to the city. The buildings may not, but the city owns the land, and many of those agreements have not been seen in many, many years, and by some of you, never at all. So a planning grant would give us the opportunity to unwind all of that, and as Sir Hill Nelson remarked, speak with the interest holders at a different level, and make sure that the community sees these agreements in the light of day and understand what belongs to the taxpayer. So I again encourage you to speak with or ask directly Bartlett and West whether they can make this pivot to a planning grant, which again I believe would answer many of these community concerns. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Magnuson. I'll try to keep this short. I've only spoken once here before, but I came here tonight not even knowing the topic, but I agree with, I really think it's important for you guys to, I came here with a different topic on my mind, and I'm not even going to, it's not about me. Okay, they want a bridge. Please, you guys have given so much to the homeless, and I'm homeless, okay? Please don't give to the homeless anymore. Okay, because I'm homeless and I'm moving away from here because I'm not gonna say less, Stephanie. You know, I get nervous. You know, I literally had nowhere else to go tonight, and it's this last minute thing. Everybody that spoke tonight, I've listened. I've been respectful, and I'm angry and I'm hurt, and I'm sleeping in an abandoned shed. It's not about me, okay? These people work hard. They lived here. They want a bridge. Please give it to them, because all the money you're putting into giving these people at the homeless shelter raises, and I have Bert Dashberger, but I'm tired of repeating myself. Nothing's getting done about it. I've got, it's miscommunication, like what she was saying. I'll keep this short. The communication is a key foundation, even in a relationship, friendship, whatever. Make that here too. It's not, I can't fix the world. I'm telling you, there's messed up stuff. And with this homeless, I heard people come here to be homeless. That's and it's true. I'm tired of, I'm sorry to say, some people deserve to be homeless, okay? Please quit giving to the homeless. I'm homeless myself, okay? With the free handouts, keep it to a minimum, and take care of the people that are hardworking citizens, like my parents, that I'm a burden to, because they have to keep helping me and I keep getting robbed, okay? And I'm sorry, it's very, it took a lot of courage for me to say that step. I'm not trying to get mad. But, yeah, anyways. But, give them the bridge, okay? I don't know a lot about the government. I'm on enough Wi-Fi all the time because my phone cards get stolen. And I lose jobs all the time because I have a place at shelter and then I don't because of a sexual assault gone wrong. And I don't know, they miscommunicate. I can get back in, then I can't. It's communication is a key foundation. That's all I got to say. And, I'm kind of have an anxiety attack right now, but thank you. That guy that spoke about the bridge, he's been saying he was living here for 20 years. He wanting that bridge? Come on, don't give it to forgive me for saying this, river rats. that are living on the, quit letting them put tents there and stuff. Okay, thank you.
Any additional public comment here in the room? All right, Sherry, any on Zoom?
I don't see any on Zoom.
All right. I'll bring it back to us for discussion and open it up.
I had a question for the young man that started the high school cycling group. If you mind standing for or at least a question? Because there was something you said in particular, you didn't really go into detail, but I would be interested in knowing, since I would consider you to be far more of a subject matter expert than myself. Okay. But you said that the current narrow concept would not be utilized. Can you explain to me why it wouldn't be utilized?
Are you saying that the proposed bridge would not be utilized? I mean, there already is 2 paths across the river. I even like to look at like the spiral path. Why would you take the time, especially if you were walking, to walk like 3 or 4 loops up to the top of this bridge when you could just walk on the sidewalk across the bridge? I understand that as a cyclist, I guess it's okay if you're trying to go west on the levee, but almost 80% of the time I'm going east on the levee, and I think most people do as well. So as a cyclist and someone who'd be walking across the bridge, I don't understand why you would use the path. It would also spit you out way west on the levee, as you can see in the photo. So I think, if you want to keep the bridge where it is, adding a covered section to it with its own wider dedicated path that you could block, I think someone mentioned like the sand and the gravel and stuff coming from the cars. I would, put a divider wall like there is on the path by the Baker wetlands, something like that, covered so people could walk across without getting rained on, something like that. So, but I think that having a bridge just directly west of it wouldn't really affect anybody,
So
in my
you
opinion.
feel like some of the design elements for at least the downtown piece might be more appreciated for maybe leisure riders, but recreational riders, I might even be saying recreational, more leisurely folks like myself who will ride.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do, any gravel competition anytime soon.
Right, and it's
Never say never, but
for sure.
But at least that design element for a more competitive rider may be more of a deterrent than it is.
Well, even it's like if you're riding or walking to your job in North Lawrence or downtown, a lot of people work downtown. It's like, why would you take the extra time to go through the spiral all the way over west on the levee when you could just walk across the bridge?
Okay.
Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, thanks.
I have a couple of questions about the process, the application process. I know there are several rounds of the planning as well as for the capital and then for the planning. Do we know how many rounds? I know that in the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's conversation around several rounds, and I know we don't know the future could hold for this. Where are we at? Where is transportation at as far as those rounds? And so, do you know why they moved it up? Why did they move up at least this round of grant funding? And then my second question is going to be, is there any community that received a planning grant that also received a capital grant?
I know they have committed funds for multiple more years of the project, but then they put out the NOFO, which has the specific criteria for what type of projects that they want to fund. And you have to wait for that NOFO, right? That notice of funding opportunity to be able to project how you can build a project to support that grant, to support what they're looking for in that case. I'm not familiar enough with award recipients. We looked through, obviously, examples of award recipients over the past few years to see what successful projects looked like in terms of their proposals and from communities. But I didn't look closely enough to know if there were communities that got both planning and or capital projects, like for both in terms of that submission. So I can't speak to that.
Okay, I'd be curious to just know if any of the capital grants noted in their applications that they also receive planning.
Yeah, and it's hard because you don't get to see what they proposed. You get to see the one-page summary sheet that gets awarded of the project when the feds make an announcement about what projects got awarded. So in the sense of knowing how everything is phased or what was competitive, you're really relying on consultants, expert guidance who have worked through these processes before to help inform your decisions about what would make a successful application. And so in these processes, we've relied on both TFG or Bartlett and West and their subcontractors to advise us in this area because of our lack of federal grant expertise in this space for federal highway grants.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I don't have any specific person to call on to ask, but I know the question that's kind of cycling through my mind, and I'm open to discussion from the dais as well as from those seated, is we're in front of us is to either move forward with the capital piece or to suggest a pivot to the planning grant based on what we've seen in comments and some other aspects as well. I guess the question that's kind of cycling through my mind is, if we were to pivot to a planning grant, what is it that we're hoping to get that hasn't been uncovered that would put us back at this place again? So I think that's the question that's going through my mind. And I don't know, if someone believes they have an answer, then I'd be interested to hear it. But what I haven't heard that has answered that question for me, I haven't heard anything to answer that question for me. So I've heard people state things, and I've heard, it's more conversation, it's more, so I'm curious to know that what specifically in the planning, if awarded a planning grant, you want to continue to do that hasn't already been continued. And it's the idea that it's going to lead us back to, because I've heard what everybody wants, but if that's not what those wanting based on what they're advocating for, which is a downstream bridge and some other things, I don't know. That's just what's cycling through my head. So,
my name is Sarah Hill. Hill Nelson, can I address that question?
Sure.
So I think actually one of the really key things when you apply for a grant like this is to consider what other funding opportunities are there available. And I think what's really interesting about this problem that we're trying to solve is that our community is divided by the river, and we're also divided by the railroad and this old industrial buildings that are along the river, which duly acknowledging Bowersock is a part of that problem. So I feel committed to try to help bridge that gap. So one of the really exciting things is with the infrastructure money, there's quite a bit of funding to address problems that railroads cause. And that would be, for example, in this case, the train often stops and it traps everyone in Bircham Park. It's the Burlington Northern Rail that is preventing us from crossing it at those at-grade crossings. And this is a whole nother stream of funding. Olathe just got $18 million in the last round, and there are 3 more rounds. And we could use, in this case, use the time to plan to say, okay, what can railroad dollars address? Because we clearly have a safety issue when you've got children getting trapped in the park and they're dragging their bikes under the train to get out. So I think we could make a compelling case for that. So I think one of the things that we could do when we went back for a grant would not only to be, where else can we get money to fund something that solves this problem for our community, but even in terms of like safety, where if something happens in North Lawrence, how do we make sure that there are multiple points of egress from North Lawrence? Thinking about general community safety as well. And other things to think about are, I heard the city staff when they said, well, the other proposed options weren't within our previous plans, but I'm not sure, for example, why you would rule something out because it hadn't ever been thought of before. So there, you know, and this wasn't my idea. I just drew it on a piece of paper. It comes from many other people, but the concept of crossing at 4th, going up at the levee, crossing up by I-70 and connecting directly to the existing loop right there where the Pallet Village will be. Just because no one had thought of it before, I think is something that doesn't mean we should rule it out. So I'd like us to consider, how do we consider the whole corridor? Other things, for example, like the proposed trails at Cameron's Bluff. How do we connect our community to those trails? So there are many things that weren't considered in this process, and I'm concerned that the steering committee was derailed by information that wasn't accurate, and then I think we landed on a solution that doesn't reflect community consensus because of information they were given that we have acknowledged was not true.
Which I appreciate you saying that. I think you bring up two different scopes, which I don't disagree. I think you're wanting to essentially utilize a planning grant to open up a bigger scope than what at least staff was looking at.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Which again, I think you're bringing in two different things. So trying to conflate both of them together, or at least try to bring them both together, I think creates an even bigger scope, which makes it even bigger task, which then changes what would then be come in front of. And I don't know if I would be comfortable with a steering committee with that. So I just want to say I hear you and I acknowledge that. I disagree with utilizing funds for a specific project to try to open up another scope for a different project. There is, to your point, there is by BIL dollars to address the BNSF piece, and I think staff have seen that. We don't have a project that aligns to it. I think at one point there may have been a recommendation by former Commissioner Shipley in regards to doing some work with the rail yards as for the history of Liarda and some other things around that, which is its own separate project, not to be conflated with what's going on with the loop. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I would not support utilizing a planning grant to bring in other elements that are not necessarily, in my opinion, germane to what the original project is, if we're utilizing those dollars to address a CIP. That's my interpretation of it, but I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Can I respond to that, which is that the steering committee was tasked with closing the loop. And so this is a way to close the loop, which would achieve what the planning committee was tasked with doing, and it does it.
Your planning part, from the planning piece, you're saying to go back and use the planning piece to have a bigger discussion about what conceptually would closing the loop look like.
And it's not necessarily a bigger discussion. It's like, how do we close the loop?
Yeah.
And right now,
it's a bigger discussion because this is in regards to a CIP. I'm hearing you, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Sarah. Sure. What I'm saying is that the planning, you're wanting to utilize the planning grant to do an even bigger piece than just what was tasked with the steering committee. So whether or not we agree to that is one thing. It's the idea of now you're wanting to negate utilizing the capital grant to bring on a planning grant to do something that's outside of the scope of the CIP.
Yeah, I think
it's two different things.
Yeah, I think it's within the scope of the CIP, but I think that's...
Excuse me.
It's okay.
I apologize to interrupt, but the back and forth is probably... Yeah. Commissioner Sellers, I believe, just to have on the staff side, your question is addressed as well. I believe staff was, I think, present and also online if you wish to go ahead and hear from them as well.
Yeah, we do have, I think, some staff on. So
bring them on.
Wanted to provide some response as well.
Mayor here.
I don't know. Which
I don't know.
Mark Haggard.
The mayor told me who was on, so I'm waiting for the mayor to tell me who's talking.
So I wanted to address a little bit, if we switch to the planning grant, I think we have to make a decision, not if we study it for another year, will we end up in a different place? If we think that we haven't studied enough and we need to look at this further, and that'll benefit us in the long run, I think that might be a good idea. If we think we're going to study it for another year and we're still going to end up basically where we are now, then I think you're spending additional money to get to the same conclusion. So, you know, in my view, we've looked at this for multiple years, and, you know, yes, a rush process short term, but it's also been looked at long term. So that's just something in my mind that when we weigh one versus the other, I think that's something we need to consider.
I'll just add a quick note that, so the MPO is responsible in our region for writing the bikeway plan, and we have a process where we try to update those plans every 5 years. So fourth quarter of 2024 is our time frame to begin the process to update the entire Lawrence Bikes plan. And so I think as we think about scoping projects and talking about all the people here tonight interested in bikeway planning, I'd be very interested in making sure you participate in those processes, because that's how we develop the plans that we move forward to do this. And when we're looking at federal grant seeking, we can't just think of a new idea and go propose it. They're looking for projects that are in our approved regional plans. And so we have to create transparency in the public process that these long-range plans create opportunities for us to collectively include diverse community voices in system planning, like for bicycles and pedestrians, which we've done in that process.
I believe in addition, Melissa Seibin has her hand up as well from staff.
Yeah, Mayor and Commissioners, I just wanted to note that what Commissioner Sellers was getting at is true. If you're looking at the change of the scope, and I think Melinda Harger was also wanting to get at this, this is a rescoping of sort of what we had out for an RFP, and she wanted to kind of talk about that process. And additionally, there are other elements that are coming out here that are not directly related to what was tasked in that RFP. So Linda, if you want to kind of take it away, and RAISE may not be, as Commissioner Sellers was saying, the avenue that would be best fitted for what is being discussed tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners. I just wanted to add that as city staff, we do need to follow our purchasing policy. And so there was a scope defined in the RFP. We do have the ability to do change orders. However, that also requires a process that would typically take 5 or 6 weeks. When we change a contract by more than 10%, this planning scope was around $270,000. It would likely increase the scope to the point where we would need to bring that back to the commission. If we were able to quickly negotiate a scope over a couple weeks and get that supplement agreement approved by the city attorney's office, it would then come to you in March, and at that point we have passed our deadline to submit. So we would be looking at next year if that is the direction we receive tonight. Staff would also want clarification on the piece which is close the loop that was funded for design this year and construction next year. If we would be asked to continue with that piece of it and be looking at planning for the other components of crossing the rail and the river, you know, would we proceed with the loop piece or push that out in the CIP? That's the process we're updating right now to come to you with a updated CIP in June. So those are just some clarifications I wanted to add, and also just mention some direction that staff would like, just for clarity.
Question for staff. I think the thing I'm most interested in was the river path. Mm-hmm. And did we get to I know we have 1.2 million where it stops. Did we get to a point where they costed out the river path before it was nixed?
Yes, when we were going through cost proposals, we had that bridge that flew over the dam costed out. So basically we could do that, the helix and the $10 million river crossing in the project. So it was viable cost-wise to do the 7th Street alignment, the river flyover. Go ahead.
I'm just going to jump right in. The number for that was $6 million for that river alignment.
I mean, so what the steering committee originally approved, which had the river and this alignment, what was the total cost of that?
It was right at $25 million.
It was at $25 million.
Yes.
have a question. Is this a matching grant situation?
No.
No, there's no match required.
Any additional questions?
I have one question.
Sure, Vice Mayor.
So it's more of a accounting, bookkeeping question. I really felt a strong pushback from staff, both in the room and on Zoom, related to changes to the contract based on our purchasing requirements. And I really want to make sure we understand what that means, because I got a feeling initially that we couldn't really talk to the consultant about any of these things we want to talk about unless we renegotiate, from what I understand. I want to make sure that's what I'm hearing. So that'd be potentially 5 weeks. It may be a short 2-week time frame, but I want to understand what everyone meant when they said this consultant, has a fixed scope of work. There's a fixed or some general amount of money in the budget, and if we try to reach out to them with changes that would somehow compromise our purchasing system or somehow compromise the contract and put us in a situation, I want to make sure I understand what that means, because I heard that earlier, and I'm unclear on that.
If Melinda's online, she's probably the best to
Yes.
answer that.
Yeah, please.
Yes, Commissioners, I'm happy to respond to that. So staff is authorized only to make changes to a certain amount. So if we wanted to change the scope of work from what the contract allows, we have to get that in writing and follow our purchasing policy up to that point. So we cannot direct them to do work and then ultimately pay them for that work if it's different than the scope that's in the agreement.
It's okay. And that process will take, to rewrite the scope and to renegotiate that scope could take a month or 6 weeks?
For comparison, to get the original scope, I think Jessica mentioned it was about 2 months. A supplement agreement like this would probably go faster. But our process to get something on the commission, we typically put our request in to be on a commission night consent agenda 3 weeks in advance, because it goes through all the approval processes. It gets finance approval, CMO approval, legal approval, before it can come to you. And then at that point, it can go through and be executed. That process on something like this is an electronic agreement that can typically be signed by the city manager's office within a few days after commission approval. But if it's a hard copy, then it can take a couple more weeks after that. So on this particular agreement, the earliest would be sometime in March, which is past the deadline for the submittal.
And have we already exhausted the funds in the original agreed upon amount for this? How much of the money have we used up at all to this point?
I took a look. It doesn't appear, but we've only received their invoice through the end of December. So they have not submitted an invoice for their work in January, February yet. And as you saw, a majority of the work happened in January. So I'm not sure yet, where they fall at the end. We haven't got the January invoice.
Okay, so realistically, anything we talk about other than approving this that's before us, any changes to that really could cause a change to the contract. More than 10%, we're going to have to renegotiate anyway. Anything, if we don't go along with what we talk about and what's been discussed to this point forward, if we add any left turns to this straight path, and it's 2 left turns, it's too much and we have to renegotiate, basically, right? I mean, that's what we're saying.
If we're planning to submit for a construction grant and make changes, my understanding is a lot of the calculations for this route for that benefit cost have already taken place. That if those are minor changes where they had to redo little calculations and still think they could get it done in time, we may be able to do that within our approval authority if it's only that part of the scope, the cost benefit analysis. But if it was a completely new application, that would exceed the 10% and have to come to the commission.
Okay, cool.
So in short, regardless of if it's a capital grant or a planning grant, it's due in 2 weeks.
Correct.
I have a question. So if this is submitted and we get the grant, if we find out some of these pieces can't be built for property access or too close to the power station, south side of the City Hall, can they be changed? I mean, that's just examples. It could be other things.
It goes back to the scrutiny piece.
I think most of what we've got on the narrowed concepts is feasible from the discussions we've had. But if we did ran into that situation, I think we would probably just have negotiations with the grant overseeing entity like we would on a state grant.
Okay, thank you.
But they could claw it back.
Pardon me?
But they could claw it back. If there was an area of concern and we weren't able to, I know. I was like,
These questions are so speculative because it's hard to say again. And so I think the intention is, we've gotten federal money before from transportation alternative grants. Those grant dollars are overseen by the Kansas Department of Transportation. In some of those processes, just like one Jake's working on now, related to the connection from Sandra Shaw to our undercrossing at K10 or at I-70, that's an example where we've had to go back and we have to continue to work with all of the parties involved, and now you have a new party, which is the federal government. Already we're going to have lots of other parties involved in this process. We're going to have the Army Corps of Engineers. We're going to have property owners in these places, including utility operators. And so I think as we get into this is a problem where you're at concept level, right? And as you get into design, there are unknowns in these processes. And so we would have to kind of take it as it comes in terms of evolving to the response of the intent, like, can we negotiate with the feds that the intent of what we submitted is still there and that the fiscal constraints can still be met, and then see where we end up in terms of that option. There's always an option that they could say, this is not the project you proposed, and no, we're not going to fund it. Generally, they want to try to work with you to achieve the project vision that you've presented. And so we would work in that situation in our best faith to go forward in that way, trying to, of course, reduce as much speculation as we could in that process. But it's hard to say. There's a lot of unknowns in this process, and we've never applied for or received a raise grant. Just like when you submit a raise grant, we've come to find out that when you submit a grant, if you are not awarded the grant in the process, you get feedback from Federal Highways. And so that gives you an opportunity to understand how you did in regards to their scoring system, and also to understand how you may want to adapt that in the future to consider future planning or construction grants in relationship to your project. So it's this federal process and all of the money in bipartisan infrastructure law has been a learning experience for us without having been involved in this federal space for construction of these type of big roadway bike ped projects that are competitive in nature.
Okay. So this is the first round in 2024 of the raise.
Yeah, generally RAISE has one round each year. And I think the current funding, the RAISE is 2022 to 2026. So we would anticipate a few more years to that. It's my understanding, though, that the NOFO is, as written, can be amended. So based on politics and legislative intent, there's committee work, and that there's details in the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, that calls for how a project is going to be scored can change over that time. That is the part that's not set. So it's hard for us to know what the intent is going to be in that program in future years.
So in short, the goalposts can move on you.
Correct. Yeah, and I think it's not to scare people with that, but it's to let people know we have spent a lot of time and energy on this process, and the desire is to deliver a product to meet these community goals. And obviously there's consternation around what approach we've taken in this process, but at the same time, it's one of the considerations we have to weigh, just like any of the others, as we're evaluating what a viable project looks like for our community to improve safety. That's something that we can feel is an unmistakable identity for our community, and that achieves the goals of connectivity and mobility and ADA that are all also values of our community.
Last question, are these direct DOT funds, or are they passing through KDOT then to us?
These are direct agreements with Federal Highways. So you negotiate an agreement with Federal Highways, and oftentimes they have a reimbursement system similar to like how we do federal transit or federal aviation dollars, that we're working directly with them and complying with federal regulations.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So, what are we thinking? I'll come first at the shoot. It's unfortunate that the timetable on this was accelerated, but given the information provided by staff, and just reading into a little bit more, it's and as Commissioner Sellers said, regardless of what's submitted, it has to be submitted before the end of this month. And I think it might be a little bit late to go ahead and turn paths right now. So, additionally to that case, this is one of the plans that was presented, and this did have some backing in the middle part of the process. So, I know that the elimination of that river piece that Commissioner Finkeldye mentioned before kind of brought this to this level. Gosh, at this point, just so that we can go ahead and get something on the books, and that this is something that has been in our CIP for years, I'd like us to go ahead and proceed with it so that we can have a viable path across the river, and also connections to the loop. I think what this path will give us as well is that viable path that folks can also connect to downtown, the library, the pool, and other amenities. So I would be in favor of approval on this.
So a couple of things. One, the deadline's in 2 weeks. So to me, it's not a binary decision of we either do it or we don't. I think the question at hand is, at least for me, is do we feel like we've done the due diligence to put together and submit an application that could or could not get funded? And if it does, it may get the full amount, it may not get the full amount. This is the federal government, formularies, wards are all done differently. So that's one. So we can either not do it, start all over, redo the scope, spend more money, and do what we think from a planning perspective, waiting another year or whenever the NOFO comes out, because this is not going to happen in 2 weeks. I think what we need to understand is that whatever change we want to happen, it's not going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So we're looking at something that we would present for next year. I think that is where we start, that if this is not what we want to do moving forward, then the option is we do a change, we have staff bring us back a change of scope for a project that could potentially be awarded next year. So that's one. Two is we move forward and hope for the best. Three, we move forward and we don't have it. And four is just we say, good money well spent, and we're back at square one. So I understand the planning piece, and I've heard from constituents that, yes, there is a need based on a different scope and a different project that has not been presented to us. That's not a CIP for us to go after dollars. That's why we have the Ferguson Group working with us to go after and to find those grant dollars based on either CIP projects that we've not been able to fund, or projects that have come up that we know there's an interest and there's a potential for us to find grant dollars out there. So we have that system working. And that's what happens when we have CIPs come before us, whether it's from staff or it's from the community, and you have that option. So the planning piece of this, I don't see that working. It's just not going to happen. And it's, whether that's lost, I think the moving up of the deadline really hamstrung us on this. And even with, maybe with the 5 weeks, maybe with the change in the deadline, if it was back to the original, we could have been cutting it real close. And I think you would have a different vote tonight based on that bit of information. But regardless of what staff has shared with the steering committee or not, changing it because of the deadlines, it just doesn't work with us. So the question is, do we continue and we vote up a project that could potentially be funded and we move forward with that? Or do we vote down this and say we start all over again next year? And I haven't made that decision yet. But those are my two choices.
I guess my concern is, as the steering committee said and the staff said, that to me, the number one priority is closing the loop. And the street option of closing the loop, I think has been on the table, and I think it's something we can fund, through our CIP. It says $1.5 million. If that's what we end up doing, to me,
Sherry,
are going to have to be.
I think if you're going to,
in front of us is to either move to add as far as those rounds.
thank you.
I think if, without the river portion of this, I don't see how we really accomplish a lot on closing the loop. And if we're going to spend $21 million to quote close the loop, I don't think this really accomplishes that. The bridge, and it does some other things, but that number one priority doesn't get accomplished. And I guess once you remove that portion of it, that's what seems to me needs to go back to the drawing board, which is how can we close the loop in a way and that gets us, through this downtown area without doing the street version. And if the answer is there's no way to do that, then I guess we're stuck with the street version. But if we're going to put a grant together, I guess I support one that we figure out a way to get through that. And again, maybe there's no way to do it. Maybe there's a way, if you spend $21 million, you could complete that part of the loop. And I guess I just don't support putting this proposal forward, because then even if we got it, we would end up with a project that I don't think really does an effective job of closing the loop.
Want me to chime in down here? I'm just going to have a few words. I promise they'll be short, Amber.
Never promise.
I'm uncomfortable with jumping in at this point and moving forward with approving application for a grant at this point in time, only because it doesn't solve several of the problems that I see as a bicycle rider who commutes to downtown from the west side of town. And I think Brad really hit the nail on the head. I think we need, if we're going to spend money on our bicycle routes in our community, and we're going to spend $10 million on a bridge, which is less than 500 feet from the abutment or the base of another bridge that can serve some people. It doesn't serve, our ADA compliance needs, and it's not the most comfortable way across a bridge, but we have a bridge there. So I'm with you. I want to see our money, I want to see our budget spent on completing the loop around Lawrence. I feel like we have kind of lost the plot a little bit here. I really love this. I would love to see something like this in Lawrence, but I feel like unmistakably Lawrence is one that you could ride around the whole community like we advertised 15 years ago when we talked about, really spending money on the loop. And this feels like a spur. This feels like a side trail or a sidetrack, and I don't want to get sidetracked on completing the loop around our community. And so I really want to spend money on this. I really want to focus our community on bicycle safety and walkability. I still can't cross in front of City Hall safely, and until I can do that and I see something that proves that, then I really want to make a clear point that we've got to fix that choke point in our community, and this plan doesn't do it for me, and that's the only reason I'm voting against it, is because I don't feel like it serves the intended purpose of the loop for me. So that's it.
Did I miss the community?
We did already have public comment on this item.
Thank you. All you had to do was text it to me.
So from my perspective, a couple of issues that I'm concerned about on this is that 6th Street and that whole congested area where we're trying to cross directly. I'm very concerned about that. And I do agree that does this accomplish in the most efficient manner to get our loop closed. And then also, having watched those meetings, that I do feel as though when staff had indicated that concrete wasn't allowed, that did make a difference based on listening to those meetings, unfortunately. And I wonder if they were given that information today, if something would be different. Obviously, we can't tell that, but I'm concerned about some of the congestion and how that's being addressed from a safety issue, as well as the information that was provided regarding the no concrete. So no, I'm voting no.
Well, I'm going to be the person to say I want to thank staff for bringing this in front of us. And I think this is a great example of what we, one, voted to have the Ferguson group for. And it shows us the process of how items that don't make the CIP and they're in that parking lot area, where we have engagement with staff and with the Ferguson group to say, hey, we have a project over here that's unfunded, and we think we may have we may have something here that fits it, and that we think it'll be pretty successful. And we went through that process, and that's what we came here to do and to vote on, whether it gets voted up or voted down. I love the fact that what we just saw was our city and our CIP in action. And it did quite well, and I think it did quite well. And so I want to thank staff for that, because those are things that I get excited about. Because those are things that I had to do when I worked for the state. And so sometimes bureaucracy can be a little bit bureaucratic. This didn't seem like that for the most part. No matter who's on the steering committee, folks are going to want a bridge downstream. They're going to want it upstream. They're going to want loop-de-loops. They're going to want helixes. They may want double helixes. They want covers. They want concrete. They want ADA. They may not want ADA. They may want it to go on the other side of the bridge, of the river. They don't want it on this side of the river because that's where the other folks are, and that's where all the camps are. We don't want anybody to get hurt, or they may not get hurt. It's competitive. It's not competitive. It's unmistakable. It's not unmistakable. It's all the things. It can be all of those things. And we do have to take those into account for this project. And I guess for me, not being a super avid writer, I can see the joy in having it on both sides. So that doesn't speak to me. I think what this process created was another opportunity for either staff or for our community during the CIP process to submit a project for something that could potentially be another raise grant for next year, or one of the railway grants that we have, or one directly through BNSF that they have. That's a little bit more, that cycle's a little bit more frequent to do those things. So I think from this one process, we ended up creating maybe 2 or 3 other projects that could potentially happen that we would have to vote on in the next couple of months on whether or not we're going to fund them, or they're going to be on the parking lot area, and we'll find the Ferguson group and they'll find some funding for that as well, and we'll go through this process again. So I don't know. I wouldn't have voted for changing it to a planning simply for the fact that we don't have time. So that was kind of a moot argument at this point to say to pivot. We don't have the time to pivot. We wouldn't have had the time to pivot even if the deadline was at its original point. We wouldn't have had it. So I wouldn't have voted for that. Where this is now, I mean, voting it up would be to get something going and to see if we could get funding for it. From here, we're hearing that for a small percentage of folks who were engaged in this process, they don't like the design. But that doesn't mean that there might be another percentage of folks out there that do like to design. So there's that piece. So, I mean, I'm voting for it on the simple fact that it allows us to go through the process. And grants, and maybe it'll change. Maybe the design is something that somebody works. I don't know. I'm hearing about making biking in downtown safe. I don't know if it'll ever be safe. I don't know what the unicorn that folks are wanting to chase with this project is ever, if this is going to meet it, or if it's ever going to be achieved. I don't think it is. I don't know if there's a safe way to cross 6th Street by City Hall because that's just a horrible area over there. I get frustrated coming out of the parking garage going home on 6th Street because it is a very high traffic, dangerous area. So to say we have a plan to make that safe, we could, but I don't know if it's going to be safe for who. I don't know how we define safe. Will it be something that is appreciated by those in the community? Probably so. And those who don't live in the community may not appreciate it and they may not want to do it. So, I mean, I have to listen to the folks who came today as well as the folks who didn't come today. And so I'm not denying this its due diligence because I'm voting against a planning piece. I would still want us to do the planning piece. That needs to happen. And I would love to see that come in front of us. But I would be voting this up tonight, but not for the reasons that others may have if they were voting for it. But I do recognize and appreciate those of my fellow commissioners who are voting this down. I just see it in a different perspective.
Commissioner Finkelday? Before I follow up, to Commissioner Finkelday's question about the Riverside, just confirmation on that. Is there any way that that could be included in the proposal that goes forward?
I don't think it would be wise to push forward a concept we know isn't feasible with the narrative we've been working with.
And Jake, let me ask you that. I mean,
Sorry?
It's not feasible given the current condition of
The current condition and the current scope of the rest of the remainder of the narrowed concepts. Remember, because when we had that bridge going through there without any complications, we were at the maximum ask of the grant. So to do anything above and beyond that with the rest of the narrowed concepts would be above and beyond what the budget of the raised grant could support.
And I guess, again, I'm voting against this because I don't like this plan. I hope we keep working on this and we come back next year and put together a raised grant. And I guess, again, I'm just throwing stuff out. I'm making stuff up, but, we have 1.5 million in for the street side. If it took $1 million to, I don't know, move the tower or, whatever, I would, say, hey, let's, use $1 million to move the tower or create something else, and then we can put this thing through. It might be that it's $10 million to move the tower or whatever. I don't know the answer to that, but I understand how we can't do it now. I appreciate that, but I hope we continue to look at those options. I guess my thought. So, Jake, I appreciate that answer.
Sure.
Okay. Sounds like we're kind of narrowing in on what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'd call for a motion on this.
So
I want to say real quick that I feel like I'm playing devil's advocate tonight. That a no, like to your point, Commissioner Finkeldye, a no vote doesn't mean never.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I hope staff comes back with a proposal to figure out how we keep working on this. It's going to cost us some more money probably, but I think we want to keep working on it. And I don't think it has to be a planning grant, to make that happen. I think we've got a lot of the information in there, so let's keep working at it.
Yeah.
I guess I can know, is the motion to deny that, I guess I'm looking, if we make a motion to approve and vote it down, is that enough?
Indirect, yeah,
So
indirect
who's going
staff.
to approve? Yeah, who's going to make a motion to approve it?
I can make the motion.
Okay.
You can take the tension out of the room. I move that we approve the raised grant concept for the Lawrence Loop Trail called River 7th Street to Constant Park project known as PR 5-B23003 and authorize the city manager to sign the letter of funding commitment.
Yes, I'm seconding it. The first and a second. I did.
The mayor.
Yeah, the mayor did. Just go ahead and get it going. All those in favor of said motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
All right, the nays carry it. 3 to 2. Okay, nay, yes. All right. That does it. Okay, moving us on to item H, commission items. Oh, hold on a sec, I'll let everybody, unless you want to hear commission items.
We'll see you next year.
Yeah,
Definitely.
get on the planning. Yeah, I mean, if we could fix our, even just a half mile downtown, I mean, it would just save everybody's lives.
All right,
River.
item H, commission items.
I had just a point of information. There's a bill that was introduced last Friday that piqued my curiosity. SB 492, short title is Repealing the Prohibition on Transportation of Alcoholic Beverages in Open Containers and on Drinking and Consuming Alcohol Liquor Inside Vehicles while on public streets, alleys, roads, or highways.
Doing away with it.
Now look, and that's how I read it. I was like,
That's scary.
We'll see.
On public streets?
Well, you guys got to read it. KSLedge.org.
I've got it written down, 492, is that?
492.
Yes.
492.
Definitely. Whoa.
Introduced by Senator Haley of Wyandotte. So, yeah, I'll get to see him tomorrow. I'll ask about it. And the reason it just piqued my curiosity because one of the things I was thinking about, as we know that the university will not be playing any home games here, I thought to kind of get a jump start on bringing back in front of the commission. I know we have a couple of ordinances on food trucks, and we've kind of discussed what, or at least I'd like to see, we've discussed it, but we haven't really seen anything in front of us as what a entertainment district could look like downtown. And so maybe start bringing that up and sooner rather than later so that we could have good time to plan for if that's something we want to do temporarily in that capacity. Right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about a common consumption area, correct?
Yes. I like that, common consumption area. So yeah, common consumption and then looking at our
It seemed like Sunday
policy
night,
around food trucks.
Sunday night after the Super Bowl, we had a common consumption for a little bit.
Unofficial.
Yes.
Unofficial common consumption.
Official.
It's,
But looking at the official one would be worth looking at.
Yeah, with a little help from SB 492.
I had one item.
Oh, before we move on to your item, is everybody cool with that?
Yeah, I think,
All right.
I think, yeah.
Sounds like
Food
I'm-
trucks
I'm-
always, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like there's a little legal behind that, so it's April, May.
Yeah, whenever.
Okay. So we coming up for a vote this fall is the vote on the mayor, directly elected mayor, as well as the districts, wards, whatever we're calling them. And I recall that when we were going through these discussions, that at some point we were going to have a discussion about what the role of the mayor, and how we perceive that whole process to work. Provide information generally to the public, so when they vote, they've got information that the commission is supporting regarding what the details of that. So, is everybody still interested in talking about that?
Yes, ma'am. You mean the role of the mayor? Or the role of the commission?
Or both?
Yeah, both role of the mayor and how that work.
Yeah.
I thought we had some of that planned out, but I'm happy to know
Yeah,
about
I
it.
don't think. Yeah, I don't remember
But I think
detail.
at the same time, we should talk about what the public education plan is.
Correct. Yes, that whole,
That I would be interested in.
and that would be part of that, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the resolution defines generally what the role would be. Did you already adopt it? But yeah, we can outline. We've been having preliminary conversations. Remember, it was so early that we said as soon as we get closer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be developing some communication, informational communication pieces.
Yeah, just make sure the public understands what they're voting on.
So when would you like to talk about that?
I know we're starting to get into the budget season.
Right. That's just going to take over everything.
Beginning of summer.
6 weeks. I mean, realistically, there's
Or
going to be
August.
a lot of things on the November ballot
Right.
that will consume a lot of interest. So,
You think?
So getting out early.
Yeah, that are,
well, I just think the best that we can do is make sure that we have our talking points together and we get them out consistently. But I don't think realistically we'll be able to capture the attention in that very crowded ballot.
I would think even late summer, actually, August, September, a couple months before the election.
To
when is the
educate or
first-
to talk about it? What do you?
Pardon me?
Are you saying to educate or to talk about it?
We could start talking and then roll out the education plan at that point, and then,
Got it.
and there would still be a couple months before the election.
Perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you want to roll out the education plan before the primary. I mean, I think you have to roll it out afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think if we talk about it in the summer, so it's ready to be rolled out late August or whatever, I think that would be the timeframe I'm thinking about.
There's virtually no staff prep time for you having a discussion because you've already adopted a resolution. I mean, the commission has.
Right. I mean, I'm not against the educational piece. I don't know if we need to discuss what we want the education to be unless someone has some specific things they wanted to talk on or, organizations or groups that we need to press upon or commissions to do that. So, I mean, I don't mind talking about, I think, one, yes, to Commissioner Finkelhauer's point, it needs to happen after the primary. When it's more captive, you have a more captive audience. I just don't know, in addition to what else are we needing to talk about the roles. I mean, because then you start getting into, you're kind of dipping into ordinance language. And I mean, if somebody wants to change the ordinance, then you do that after the form of government. We don't do that.
Yeah,
After the vote, you don't do it before.
I would agree because all we're really doing is reiterating what we previously stated or decided on. So, I mean, all we really would need is the public education piece to make sure that people, one, know it's coming, two, what it's all about, and three, probably have a readily available resource where they can have their questions answered.
But I think it warrants a discussion at the commission as far as understanding what staff is proposing for the educational piece.
How about me?
And
May?
I mean, so that can be a city manager's report of outlining what that's going to look like and what the talking points are. But I don't know if we need to have input on talking points because that's electioneering.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
we're playing with the line.
And if it isn't, there could be the potential that something could happen during those discussions that could be along those lines. So,
I think it's part of the educational piece is just making sure the public understands exactly what the vote means.
Because we're changing,
It's-
our form of government, and people are used to things one way, and now it's going to be a different way, and you got to make sure they get it. And if they don't get it, if they vote for it and they don't like it, there's going to be so I would rather we err on the side of, hey, we really tried to make sure you understand what this means to you as a citizens. But if you all think it's pretty clear based on your previous discussions, then I'm not.
well, I mean,
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I think you and Commissioner Larson are talking about two different things. Commissioner Larson's getting into, we're telling staff whether or not we agree with what they came up with as far as talking points. My thing is, what you're talking about is, yes, there needs to be a plan. What is the plan? We're going to be at the fair. We're going to do this at the library. There are these talking points. Here's the website. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say yay or nay on whether or not I like talking points on
Sure.
the form of government. Because one, it's in the ballot. That sample language will be out there. Two, that's towing the line of electioneering.
Totally understand what you're saying now.
And I don't,
Yeah.
no.
That makes sense.
How about
I
a
can't
work
do that.
session?
Yeah, that's fine. But in May, we'll outline, this is the communications plan that'll be compliant with electioneering law. And
Right.
just to show you, this is how we plan to roll out communication. It probably won't have graphics or anything at the time, but we'll show you this is the plan.
It isn't a prominent part of the agenda. People should be able to see it. You will hear it, and, people can comment on it, and then, yeah.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, city managers report, unless, I apologize.
Oh, that's it.
Any further commission
I
items?
have none, sir. Thank you. Anything?
City managers report.
Okay, thank you. A couple of memorandum.
Not on commission
Not on
items.
commission items.
A couple of memorandum were included in your packet. One, the first one is an outline that was brought to us by MSO and Planning Development Services, and it really does outline the work that's already been done to improve the development process, the work that is underway right now, and the work that we plan to do. And it's pretty impressive and it's pretty comprehensive. So I just want to draw your attention to that. We give it to you so you have some talking points. We'll be communicating this more out to the community. Obviously, we've been through the electronic permitting and licensing implementation, which was a heroic effort by those teams. And as we start to get into there, the users of the system are really going to experience this improvement, both on the technology and some of the other things that you see noted in here. So we just wanted to give you and the community some talking points on that process. There are two other items from our city attorney's office that are just answering your questions that you posed for some legal issues and impacts that they might have, and their analyses are in there as well. And then upcoming meetings. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Craig?
No, sir.
Not seeing any. All right, this is a public comment item. Any public comment here in the room? Not seeing any. Any online?
Stephen Watts?
Yeah. Public comment. It's almost becoming a joke, is it not? I mean, I've been texting away here, asking questions. There's never a response. Who is the person responsible for responding to these texts? I wouldn't have asked the question about input on the other matter had somebody responded to this. And now, all right, we have the very nicely paid and very good working city manager opining on, well, actually very little. And so you have to scratch your head and wonder, what is going on with this operation? I mean, is this just it is incredible the way these meetings take place and the inability of this town commission to run our town. The public speaks to the town to run the town. There aren't any matters to discuss about what the city manager's report is on. The city manager doesn't report on the failure of his staff to respond to telephone calls, The city manager's office does not respond to, well, a whole lot. Unless you have a whole lot of money and are there hat in hand smiling. Again, let's back up. I had some matters to discuss about relative to the equivocation that you were presented relative to the fire department issues and carbon monoxide detectors, and yet denied that opportunity to talk. This is just incredible, you guys. Do you look at the meeting chat? I mean, do you just not care? Is that what it is? Who are the people responsible to respond to these issues inside the decorum of the meeting? Next week, we will talk about, and the city manager did not bring this up, the much delayed whitewashing report coming from the group relative to the police department work group. After that, what's going to happen next? Are you guys going to do away with the police review board? Because, you know, all those meetings have stopped. The police issues have not stopped in our community. With that, I will stop. This is just incredible you let this happen. You let these people do this nonsense inside the text chatting of the Zoom meetings. Do you have to come there in public, in person? Is that what you want? Please think about that. Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right, Sherry.
I just want to take a second to say very much appreciate the planning development update summary and what Melissa and Jeff put together there, the work they've been doing, the work they're going to do. Certainly looking forward to the 2 text amendments we initiated and then some of this future initiatives, so I look forward to that. So thanks for putting that together, but thanks even more for the work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've been hearing good things, and it's good to know that we're moving in a positive direction. So, all right. Anything else? All right. Moving on to the next item, commission calendar. Any items on the calendar?
Nope. Looks like some ribbon cutting needed.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything. I'm going to move this on. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that, sir.
Okay.
second it.
First and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Pass 5-0. We are adjourned.
Have a good night, everyone.
Oh, this is.
Cunts. Mother.